Chapter 1279. Yang Yi unscrewed the screw and opened the baffle of the air vent. When he saw Murphy hiding inside, his heart ached. He took out a tissue from his pocket and wiped the tears from Murphy's eyes. He pretended to be relaxed and said, "It's okay. Don't worry, I'm fine." In fact, Yang Yi was relieved because he found that the opponents were not strong. They were just ordinary people who only knew how to use guns and bombs to bully ordinary people. After killing the two men in gray, Yang Yi got their communication devices and could know their movements at any time. It could be said that the toilet was safe for the time being. Therefore, Yang Yi had the time to open the air vent to comfort Murphy and the children. Although her tears were flowing, Murphy didn't want Yang Yi to worry. She tried to calm herself down and said softly, "I heard the gunshots just now. I didn't know what happened to you. Thank God you're fine." "Of course I'm fine. They were just some small fish and shrimps. Your husband is powerful," Yang Yi said with a smile. "How are she and mommy?" Only then did Mo Fei realize what was going on. He hurriedly made some space so that Cici could squeeze little Momo, and the two little heads squeezed out one after another. He, Papa." When Xiao Yujing saw Papa, he thought the game was over. He gave a clear cry and laughed with Papa in delight. Sure, you can't speak loudly," Yang Yi said quickly. She was sensible. The little girl looked at her father's face worriedly and said in a low voice, "Papa, I miss you so much." "Papa misses you too. It's okay. Wait patiently for a while. After we finish the game, we'll go shopping, okay?" Yang Yi comforted with a smile. Cici nodded obediently and continued to say in a low voice, "Papa, let me tell you, just now, you made 3 bangs, but Mama still doesn't know." "I was the one who told Mama." Yang Yi braced himself and listened to his daughter patiently. He knew that at this time, she also needed to express her uneasiness. It was not good to hold it in. Tong Tong was sandwiched between his sister and his little head was pressed under his sister's chin. He blinked his eyes in confusion. Finally, the little guy who felt very uncomfortable struggled. "Big sister." Little Bayan twisted around and looked pitifully at Cici. She seemed to come back to her senses at this time. She stepped back to give her brother some space. However, she was still reluctant to leave her father. She seemed to have thought of something and said in a low voice, "Papa, I'm hungry." Seeing his daughter's pitiful appearance, Yang Yi patted his head and said with a smile, Papa is such a big idiot. I actually forgot. Wait a moment." Yang Yi opened the partition of the bathroom and went to the next cubicle. He opened his carry-on bag and took out some chocolates, biscuits, and other snacks. After all, he was traveling with a child, so he must eat a lot. Yang Yi was also brave. At this critical moment, he calmly took out little Momo's milk bottle and used the hot water in the kettle, which was installed on the train, to fill the bottle with milk for the little guy. Of course, it didn't take too much time. Yang Yi's movements were very swift. When Yang Yi climbed up again, he had already handed a small bag of food, a bottle of milk, and a bottle of mineral water to Tong Tong like a hotel waiter. She, take a look at this milk. If it gets cold, you can give it to your brother. Hua, you have to share some with your sister. In times of trouble, we have to help each other in order to overcome the difficulties together, understand? Yang Yi didn't care whether Hua could understand or not, so he gave a few words of advice. However, after having food, she and Tong Tong's emotions were soothed. Murphy also relaxed a little because of Yang Yi's calm and collected performance. After unscrewing the lid, Yang Yi walked out of the women's bathroom. His gentle eyes became sharp again. Yang Yi sneaked back to the potted plant. He first observed the situation in the waiting hall of the station. There wasn't much change. The hostages were still lying on the ground, and the surrounding area was guarded by armed men in gray. Then, Yang Yi took out his phone and looked at the news on the internet. According to the news, as Yang Yi had expected, the negotiations had reached a stalemate. The hijackers were still clamoring that if they didn't get a satisfactory answer, they would start killing one hostage every 10 minutes in half an hour. Time. I have about 15 to 20 minutes left. Yang Yi looked at his watch and calculated in his mind. According to the police's habit, they would take action at the most critical moment. In other words, Yang Yi only had about 15 minutes left to do what he wanted to do. 15 minutes is enough. Yang Yi got up quietly. Like a ghost, he silently avoided the surveillance cameras and passed through the staff passageway. Then, he avoided a man in gray who was patrolling the staircase and climbed up to the 3rd floor like a gecko. Yang Yi wanted to do 2 things. First, he wanted to go to the surveillance room and destroy all the surveillance video records. After all, even though he had avoided the surveillance camera, the 2 men in gray that he had killed had swaggered past the surveillance camera. Yang Yi didn't know if these people had cut off the surveillance signal, but he couldn't take the risk. He had to clear himself of suspicion. Of course, the second thing was also for the same purpose. After he cut off the surveillance signal, he wanted to move the 2 men in gray from the men's bathroom to another place, so that others wouldn't think of him as a hero. However, just as Yang Yi was about to go to the surveillance room, he heard an angry shout from the intercepted headset, which made his heart sink. It was the leader's command, but it was different from the calm command he had given at the beginning. It seemed that the failure of the negotiation had made him angry. But what really made Yang Yi uneasy was the content of his command. Yang Yi, who could completely understand their language, could clearly hear the leader asking the people downstairs to send people up to move the big guy down and stick it on the pillar in the waiting hall. If the arrogant politicians didn't agree with his request, and if the military and police dared to rush in, he would send the entire station to the sky and let everyone be buried with them. F***CK. There really are explosives. Yang Yi's heart was pounding like a herd of alpacas. He clenched his teeth and clenched his fists. If they really did move the big guy down, there would be a conflict during the final battle, and then the station would be detonated. Yang Yi didn't think that he, Murphy, and the children, who were hiding in the toilet, would be able to escape this disaster. When the nest is overturned, there will be no eggs left intact. But just as Yang Yi was cursing in his heart, he raised his eyebrows slightly and turned his gaze to a big room with the sign, Surveillance Room. He was indeed looking for this room at the beginning, but Yang Yi found this room not because he saw the sign on the door, but because his sharp ears heard the movements in the room. Although the leader's shout came from his headset, Yang Yi's other ear, which was wearing his own headset, could also hear the exact same sound from the crack in the door of this room. These people, weren't they negotiating with the officials at the control center? Why would they be here? Of course, Yang Yi quickly thought of the key point. The control center of the train station was usually set up on the top floor, which was easier to break into. In comparison, the surveillance room could see all the positions inside the train station through the surveillance camera, and it was also safer and more secretive. So, these people set up the command center here. I searched high and low for it, only to find it by chance. Yang Yi thought to himself. But he was not in a hurry to make a move. Instead, he silently crept over, and when no one was paying attention, he slowly adjusted the camera that was aimed at the door of the surveillance room. In order not to attract the attention of the people in the surveillance room, Yang Yi did not move too far, only making sure that the camera could not see him. Then, he stuck close to the wall, like a shadow, and crept along the blind spot of the camera. Just like before, without making a sound, he twisted the neck of the man in gray who was guarding the door. Really too weak. Yang Yi felt that this group of people, other than their courage to face death unflinchingly, could not even compare to some of the special forces in the country. They had no sense of danger at all. Yang Yi used his body to support the collapsed body of the guard, and put him down along the wall. There was no time to hide in a hidden place, because after the leader finished shouting, there were already people downstairs calling for help, preparing to go upstairs. Going upstairs, 1, 2, 3 people. Yang Yi counted the names. Then, he leaned against the door of the monitoring room and closed his eyes. He listened carefully and counted in his heart. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 breathing sounds. It was less than he had imagined. Chapter 1280. In the monitoring room, the leader of the gray-clothed men was shouting angrily into the phone. When he was agitated, he even waved one of his arms. Beside him, one person was using a small computer that he carried with him to pay close attention to the movements of the media. Another person was closely watching the surveillance cameras on the wall. He was paying close attention to some of the surveillance cameras that might have been broken in. In addition to these three people, there was also a man in gray who was in charge of combat. When the knocking sound came, he was sitting near the door with a rifle in his hands. When he heard the knocking sound, he grabbed the rifle tightly and stood up vigilantly. "Who is it?" he asked in a deep voice. "Take the big guy. Didn't XXX say so?" A familiar Semitic voice came in. Although the voice sounded a little impatient, the man in gray was still relieved. At the same time, the leader who was on the phone put the microphone in front of him and waved for the man to open the door. He looked impatient, as if he was worried that their conversation would interfere with his negotiation. The man in gray who was on guard did not dare to be negligent. He quickly freed one hand to open the door. When he saw the man in the gray windbreaker, he further relaxed his vigilance. However, when the man in gray in front of him raised his head and revealed a face that was completely different from theirs, the man in gray who was in charge of security suddenly realized that something was wrong. However, he only had time to widen his eyes. The light in his brown pupils froze in an instant, and he could no longer speak. Yang Yi's sharp eyes pierced through the man's shoulders that suddenly drooped. He looked at the leader who was still busy negotiating and the technicians on both sides who were focused on the screen. That's right, Yang Yi had disguised himself as the gray-clothed man. He had put on the gray-clothed man's windbreaker and even put on the man's hood. The dagger he had used to stab the gray-clothed man's chin at lightning speed into his brainstem and medulla oblongata had all been found on the gray-clothed man outside the door. After calmly getting rid of the first man in gray, Yang Yi's left hand was like an iron clamp tightly holding the man's arm. He held the man's body firmly and blocked the view of the people inside. Yang Yi's right hand slowly let go of the handle of the dagger. He gently reached for his waist and pulled out the sharp machete. 2 drops of blood fell. One dripped on Yang Yi's windbreaker, and the other dripped silently on the ground. In the monitoring room, the other 3 people didn't notice. The leader who was on the phone even waved at Yang Yi, indicating that he should wait there until he finished the call. However, Yang Yi already recognized the leader who was on the phone. It was the man with the pair of malicious eyes that he couldn't forget. Perhaps the negotiation was met with a strong rebuttal again. His eyes were filled with hatred, madness, and viciousness. "There's no need to wait for half an hour. I'll let you see the consequences of angering me." The leader slammed the phone down in exasperation. He cursed and shouted in the control room, "Pick 10 hostages for me and drag them out." Perhaps he was too angry, but he forgot to give orders over the radio. However, the leader didn't care. He reached out and pressed a microphone on the control panel. Their people had connected it from the control room. It could broadcast directly to the entire station. The leader, who was almost crazy, attracted the attention of his 2 assistants. They couldn't help but turn to look at their boss. At this moment, Yang Yi knew that his chance had come. XXX. Listen to my orders, now. The broadcast in the station could be clearly heard in the monitoring room. The leader, who was spitting into the microphone with bloodshot eyes, didn't notice that the heads of the 2 assistants behind him had been twisted at a strange angle, and they silently fell into their chairs. "Catch 10 people, no 20. The broadcast stopped abruptly, and there was no more sound, leaving only a puzzling silence. Of course, the passengers and hostages in the station were scared out of their wits. They were lying on the ground shivering. However, without any further orders, the guards in gray didn't know where to start. Catch people? What for? How would they know? The leader that they worshipped had his neck slit and was lying in a pool of blood in the monitoring room. Yang Yi didn't make any unnecessary movements. He neatly approached the leader and covered his mouth. With a swipe of his scimitar, the world became peaceful again. So talkative. Yang Yi coldly glanced at the eyes of the KBFZ leader, who had once made him fearful, and thought to himself, "I thought you were strong. Turns out you are just a piece of trash." However, After getting rid of the 4 people in the monitoring room, Yang Yi didn't have time to be happy. He moved the body of the guard outside the door into the room and closed the door. There were 3 people in gray going up the stairs. Although Yang Yi had enough time to escape, he didn't have enough time to destroy all the surveillance footage. Therefore, Yang Yi decided to go all out and ambush the next 3 people. Of course, Yang Yi didn't try to be brave. He was able to assassinate the 4 people in the monitoring room without using a gun. That was because he was playing a psychological game. He hit the other party when they were unprepared. Moreover, among the 4 people, 2 of them were technicians. They didn't have any fighting power. However, Yang Yi didn't think that he could rely on a scimitar to get rid of 3 armed militants. Therefore, Yang Yi also picked up a gun this time. Fortunately, he found a gun with a silencer on the control panel. The experienced Yang Yi didn't just wear gloves while holding the gun. He also used someone's scarf to wrap his wrist and the windbreaker that he had stolen. As Yang Yi had expected, although Yang Yi had imitated the leader's voice and made the other party lower their guard, the moment the door of the monitoring room opened, the smell of blood that escaped made the leader in gray open his eyes. However, by the time he realized that something was wrong, it was already too late. Yang Yi, who was pretending to be a guard behind the door, raised his hand at lightning speed. Yang Yi pointed the first 2 shots at the 2 men in gray standing behind him, who were still in a daze. The bullets drilled into their foreheads. The leader in gray was exactly what Yang Yi had thought. He panicked and made a dodging action. If Yang Yi had fired at him, he might not have hit the vital parts. However, Yang Yi had already calculated everything. When the other party hurriedly squatted down to dodge, he put away the gun with his right arm and held the Gurkha scimitar with his left hand. He leaned forward and swung. In terms of shooting, Yang Yi didn't dare to say that he was very good. However, in terms of knife skills, Yang Yi didn't believe that there were many people in the world who were better than him. Therefore, under the silver light that was as beautiful as the moonlight, the leader of the gray-clothed men was not spared either. He dropped his gun and covered his bleeding neck. With 2 whimpers, he fell to the ground with a loud thud. Scum! Yang Yi sighed faintly. There was even a hint of resentment. 15 minutes later, a media reporter waved his phone in ecstasy and rushed to the military police headquarters that was setting up an inescapable trap. Another 5 minutes later, the special military police, who were ready, attacked the Paris train station that KBFZ had occupied for more than an hour. Smoke bombs and flash bombs kept exploding. The intense gunfire could be heard clearly from the reporter's area far away. An hour later, on the TV, the host reported sorrowfully, "It has finally come to an end." According to incomplete statistics, more than 60 station staff and tourists were unfortunately killed at the scene, and more than 100 people were injured. During the police's siege, 6 police officers were unfortunately hit by stray bullets and died in the line of duty. In addition, more than 10 military police officers were injured and are currently undergoing emergency rescue. However, just as the host and an expert were fiercely discussing whether it was appropriate for the police to give up on negotiations and choose to attack the station directly, their TV station received an unconfirmed piece of news. The host excitedly reported again, "We received news that the police found XXX equivalent explosives in the station. Fortunately, these explosives weren't equipped with detonators and weren't detonated. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable." Regardless, this successful rescue operation made people who were paying attention to this incident heave a sigh of relief. They started to light candles on social media and pray for the injured tourists and police officers. At this moment, in the train station, where the smoke had yet to disperse, Yang Yi and Murphy, who had just come out of the toilet, were sitting in the ambulance driven by the paramedics. His and Murphy's clothes were dusty, their hair was messy, and they looked like they were still in shock. Shi and Tong Tong were in their father's arms, and their heads were covered by their father's big hands. They could not see anything except for the sirens in their ears. She was still very obedient. She vaguely sensed that something was wrong. The scared little girl just wanted to hug her father and bury her head in his thick chest. Only in this way could she feel a little safe. Tong Tong, on the other hand, was very mischievous. The little fellow had no idea what he had just experienced. When he heard the ambulance siren, he could not help but twist around in his father's arms. Unfortunately, he could not break free from his father's large hands. Delicate car, I want to see a delicate car. The little guy, who was covered in his father's stomach, began to muffled cries. Chapter 1281. Yang Yi's family, as well as the other hostages who had been rescued, were escorted by the police into the ambulance. They left the train station, which was a mess and looked as cruel as a battlefield. When the ambulance drove out of the gloomy train station and passed through the gate, it was as if they had entered another world. Through the window of the ambulance, if they did not look at the police cars, reporters, or the helicopters hovering in the sky, they would realize that the morning sun in Paris was bright and beautiful. It gave people a sense of warmth and hope in the cold winter. There were several hospitals that had taken in the hostages. The hospital that Yang Yi and his family went to was also very chaotic. Injured hostages were sent in from time to time, and there was not even a quiet ward available. However, Yang Yi's family could temporarily rest in the restaurant that was guarded by the police after the doctor checked that there were no injuries. They couldn't leave for the time being because the police would come over later to take their statements and do a background check. This was normal, as after such a big incident, every country would conduct a background check to ensure that KBFZ did not take advantage of the chaos to slip away. Moreover, it was fortunate that Yang Yi and his family were East Asians. If they had been Middle Easterners, they would have been interrogated on the spot. Although his luggage and communication equipment had undergone a preliminary inspection before he left, they had not been taken away. Therefore, after some thought, Yang Yi decided to call back to China and ask Guazi's father to help pass a message to the embassy. After putting away his phone, Yang Yi returned to the dining table. Shi and Tong Tong were drinking milk and eating croissants for breakfast. I want it. Tong Tong pointed at the croissant in his sister's hand. When he saw the butter filling in his sister's bread, he waved his hands and shouted excitedly, "You have it too. You can eat it inside." She pointed at the croissant in her brother's hand and shouted. The little girl's tone was raised by her brother. The croissant was very heavy, and Tong Tong could only grab a corner of it. It was a little difficult for him to chew on it with his small mouth. In fact, the breakfast in France was quite ordinary. It was not as varied as Chinese food. However, such a big loaf of bread was something new to the two children, so Shi and Tong Tong ate it with relish. Tong Tong lowered his head and looked at the mountain of bread in his hand. He shook his head unwillingly. He used his trump card on his sister, his pitiful eyes and expression. His mouth was slightly open as if he was anticipating something. She had no choice but to reach out her hand and pass the croissant to her brother. She was still chewing on the bread as she said vaguely, "Then I'll let you have a bite." He. Tong Tong immediately beamed with joy. He held his sister's hand between his two small wrists and pressed it down. Then, he lowered his head and bit into the croissant. When he raised his head, not only was his mouth full, but there was also a bit of butter on the tip of his nose. He. She was amused by this scene and laughed happily. Although the little girl noticed that something was wrong at the train station and was worried about her father's safety, she was only a 7-year-old girl after all. She did not have such complicated thoughts. When she saw that her father had returned safely, she left the train station without being exposed to the tragic situation. Naturally, she forgot about the unpleasant things and played with Tong Tong. Tong Tong and his sister looked at each other and smiled. He did not notice the butter on his nose. He excitedly held out the bread in his hand and said in a childish voice, "Sister, eat. I don't want it. Your saliva is on it." She teased him on purpose. "Oh, I can't." Tong Tong did not comply and continued to hold out his hand. He only withdrew his hand after his sister shared the bread with him. However, compared to the carefree children, Murphy was greatly affected. After all, she knew that something big had happened. Moreover, when she left, she saw the bloodstains on the ground. This scene would probably bring nightmares to the simple-minded Murphy. Therefore, Yang Yi saw that Murphy had lost her appetite. She only drank some milk and gently held the cup while looking at the children in a daze. Yang Yi simply moved the chair over and reached out to hug Murphy's slender body. He gently kissed Murphy's forehead and said softly, "It's okay." Mo Fei snuggled against Yang Yi's broad chest. There were thousands of words in her heart that she wanted to say, but when the words came to her mouth, she found that she couldn't say anything. She just felt as if she hadn't slept for several days and nights. She was very tired. She just wanted to stay in Yang Yi's safe and warm arms, avoiding the wind and rain while having a quiet rest. However, when she closed her eyes, Murphy was a little frightened and could not help but shed a few tears. She sniffled and whispered in front of Yang Yi, "Hubby, I'm scared." Yang Yi could only hold Murphy in his arms so that she could feel safer. He even softly coaxed her, "It's okay, it's okay. Isn't it all in the past? Let's wait for a while. We won't buy any clothes. Let's book the fastest flight and go home, okay?" Murphy weakly nodded and whispered in agreement, "Okay, we won't buy clothes." She just wanted to follow Yang Yi and take the children back to their familiar and safe hometown. Cece still noticed her mother's strange behavior. The little girl put the bread back on the plate and jumped down from the chair with her two small hands. She ran to her father and mother's side. "Mom, what's wrong?" She blinked her big eyes that seemed to be able to speak. She looked at her mother, who was facing her father with her back facing her, and then looked at her father and asked in a low voice, "Mom is tired. She needs to rest." Yang Yi told a white lie. Cece came to a sudden realization. However, the little girl did not comfort her mother. Instead, she ran back and sat on her chair. She actively muttered to her brother, "Mama is tired and wants to sleep." "Brother, you can't speak loudly, okay?" "Can't speak loudly?" However, it did not matter. Tong Tong was not as talkative as his sister. He held the croissant that his sister had already bitten open and kept eating while looking at her. The Paris train station incident was a major event that shocked the world. It also attracted the attention of many countries and foreign media. The fastest and most effective response was the Chinese embassy. After the incident, they quickly sent a commissioner to the police station to find out if any Chinese citizens were injured or killed in the incident. However, soon, a domestic phone call came in. Not only was the embassy alerted, but some of the mainstream Chinese media reporters who were waiting for news at the embassy also received the news that surprised them. In this major event, not only did Chinese citizens appear at the scene, but their identities were also not simple. Looking at the ambassador who rushed to the hospital in a hurry, although the reporters could not follow him, they all excitedly picked up their phones and contacted the headquarters in China. Soon, the news spread throughout the country. All major media outlets that did not have overseas resources and online media reposted the short message. It is reported that China's outstanding entrepreneur and entertainment star Yang Yi and Murphy's family were involved in the Paris train station robbery during their trip. They have been sent to the hospital and their condition is unknown. This news was not shocking enough. After all, it was published by the official media, so the wording was more cautious. The media that reposted the news reported the news one after another. The wording was even more alarmist, such as the biggest celebrity who appeared in the Paris train station KX, the future richest man in China, and the superstar. Many titles were given to Yang Yi and Murphy. Then, they used the tragic news of Yang Yi's family's uncertain survival to stir up the public's emotions. For a time, even though Guazi immediately used micro-broadcasting to inform the public that Yang Yi's family was safe and sound, it did not stop the public from praying for Yang Yi. It was as if Yang Yi was about to die. Everyone cried and shouted on micro-broadcasting, sending out red candles and praying for Yang Yi's safety. Chapter 1282. When the domestic media uproar just began, Yang Yi was already being interrogated by 2 routine police officers in the hospital's cafeteria. Because the other party's attitude was not too bad because he was yellow, and they allowed the delicate Murphy and the children to rest on the other side, Yang Yi did not insist on hiring a lawyer. "We boarded the train from Leipzig, Germany last night and arrived in Paris at 6:10 in the morning." Yang Yi answered in fluent French, which made communication much smoother than English, and left a good impression on the other party. We came to Paris for tourism and shopping. My wife and I are in the music industry in China. When the incident happened, we happened to be in the bathroom in this area. I heard gunshots, so I asked my family to hide inside. Yang Yi asked the other party to take out the diagram of the train station, pointed to the bathroom where they hid, and said frankly, "I don't know why they didn't search our bathroom. Fortunately, we were not discovered by KBFZ. When I heard gunshots outside, I was already very nervous." Yang Yi spread his hands and showed a trace of fear, but I didn't tell the children what happened. I just told them that we were playing a game of hide and seek. However, it had to be said that for such a big incident, the French police's attention level rose to a very high level. Even for an inconspicuous passenger like Yang Yi, they had already investigated a lot of information based on his passport. A police officer took out a piece of paper and asked seriously, "We found that you originally booked a train ticket from Sweden to Paris on the 12th. You should have arrived in Paris yesterday. Why did you change to the train that arrived today?" "Because Leipzig is too attractive. As I said just now, my wife and I are in the music industry in China, so when we passed by Leipzig, we wanted to go to Leipzig." Yang Yi answered calmly, "So we changed the train." The police officer wrote the statement, then picked up the paper about Yang Yi's investigation information, looked at it, and nodded. Obviously, Yang Yi's words were similar to the answer he expected. At this time, at the door of the restaurant, a group of people filed in. There were Chinese people in suits and several high-ranking police officers accompanying them. "I'm Gao Yi, the minister of the Chinese embassy in France." "Are you Mr. Yang Yi?" The middle-aged man, who was not tall, but his image and temperament were very serious, extended his hand to Yang Yi. There was no need to elaborate on the small talk. With the help of the people from the embassy, Yang Yi's family could finally leave the hospital. They took the car driven by the embassy and returned to the headquarters of the Chinese embassy in District 7 in France. The minister, Gao Yi, was the second in command in the embassy. However, he was also very busy and did not have time to chat with Yang Yi. After sending Yang Yi to the embassy, he received a notice that there were casualties of Chinese citizens in the disaster. He excused himself and hurriedly brought others to the hospital for a visit. Yang Yi, Murphy, and the children sat in the conference room inside the embassy. A staff member helped to entertain them. "We are finally safe. At least we can hear the familiar Mandarin." Yang Yi patted Mo Fei, who was still a little nervous, stretched his body, and said with a smile. He wanted to use positive emotions to get Murphy out of her fear as soon as possible. The effect was not bad. Seeing Yang Yi smiling so relaxedly, Murphy was also relieved. She smiled gently at Yang Yi, took a sip of hot water, and whispered thank you to the girl. The appearance of Yang Yi and Murphy still caused quite a stir inside the embassy. After all, these two people were famous. Even if many diplomats rarely cared about the domestic entertainment industry, Yang Yi and Murphy still made many diplomats remember them because they were in the limelight in the United States and sang a lot of English songs. Some of the younger staff members in the business department or the science department couldn't hold back their curiosity. They came to the conference room to see Yang Yi and Murphy under the pretense of concern, and shyly took out a small notebook for Yang Yi and Murphy to sign. There were even some girls who liked Shi very much. Seeing the delicate little girl sitting on the side and taking care of her brother, they couldn't help but ask to take a photo with Shi as a souvenir. No. The little girl mischievously turned her head and jumped down from the chair. It wasn't that she was shy, nor was it that she was throwing a tantrum. The little girl ran to her father's side, pressed her hands on her father's thigh, and jumped up and down. Only then did she look back at the big sister and shyly smiled. I have to let Papa tie up my hair before I can take a photo. Oh, this little girl is getting more and more shameless. However, because Shi's hair was messy after climbing the pipe, and she didn't have a chance to take a shower yet. When Yang Yi wiped the little girl's face, he also used a hot towel to wipe the dust on Shi's hair. So, after he untied Shi's hair tie, Yang Yi didn't have time to tie up Shi's hair. The laughter in the conference room diluted some of the sadness and tension. Murphy also looked much calmer. She also sat beside Yang Yi, reached out to touch Shishi's head, and smiled softly. Inside the embassy, especially in the office area at the back, signal control was actually implemented. Sitting in the office, Yang Yi didn't even know that his mobile phone signal was blocked. It wasn't until Lan Cao Kai couldn't wait and directly called the embassy to ask about Yang Yi's news that the staff transferred the signal through the landline that Yang Yi and Lan Cao Kai talked on the phone. "Are you really okay? You're fine after returning to the embassy? That's God's blessing. When we saw the news, we were scared to death," Lan Cao Kai said with emotion. Xion's mother was so worried that she cried. "Although Xiao Guo said that you were fine, we were still very worried." When Yang Yi heard this, his heart felt warm. Just as he was about to say something, a loud voice suddenly interrupted them. "I was also very worried. Papa Yang, you've been away for so long. Why haven't you come back yet?" Lan Xian shouted. "I've already come back from my grandpa's place." Yang Yi was stunned for a moment, and couldn't help but smile. This little fat girl didn't seem to realize the seriousness of the matter. However, the little girl's concern made Yang Yi feel very gratified. When he went back, he would give this little girl an extra drumstick. "It's okay, Xion. We'll be back soon. Don't worry," Yang Yi said softly. "Xion?" Shi, who was next to him, heard her father call her when he was on the phone, and suddenly became excited. She quickly ran over and asked excitedly, "Papa, is that Xair? I want to talk to Xion." Therefore, the phone was occupied by these two little girls. After leaving Sweden, Shi, who hadn't talked to Lan Xion, excitedly chatted with Lan Xion on the phone. "Xion, let me tell you, we were very strange today. My brother, Mom, and I all went to the sky. Not the sky but the building. Well, and I played the piano yesterday. A lot of people saw me. It's okay here, but I ate delicious bread in the morning. I haven't taken a picture yet. I forgot to take a picture." Yang Yi asked the embassy's technical staff to help remove the signal limitation on his mobile phone. Suddenly, a lot of missed calls and text messages flooded in. So many. Yang Yi was a little surprised, but also a little touched when he looked at the familiar names in the missed calls and text messages, as well as the worried greetings. Ding Xiang, Guazi, Mo Xiaowan, Lu Xiaoshu, Miao Chuan, Duyuan Lei, Zhu Jie, Lu Benji, Fu Jun, Mao Peifu, Chen Fengchen, and so on. Even Hu Songnan from Harbor City, Lin Mu and Chanyi Jie, and those star friends who had filmed shows and movies with him. It turned out that there were so many people who cared about them. Yang Yi, who was a little unsociable, was a little touched. Chapter 1283. When natural and man-made disasters happened in other countries, ordinary people in the country might not gloat, but they would just watch calmly. They would rarely be as compassionate as they were when they prayed for blessings on micro-broadcasting and worried about those who were not related by blood. However, after the news of Yang Yi and his family being involved in the KX at the Paris train station broke out, the news really touched the hearts of many people. Regardless of whether they were fans of Yang Yi and Murphy, many netizens were worried about Yang Yi, Murphy, and their two children who were very famous and liked by netizens. After all, Yang Yi and Murphy's image was still very positive. They didn't have any scandals and didn't cause trouble all day long. This kind of low-key, serious, family-oriented, and responsible star was still very popular. Jia Siyuan was like this. She and her husband were both die-hard fans of Mo Fei, but after they had babies, they were all so busy because of the babies that they didn't have time to pay attention to the news of the entertainment industry. They only occasionally paid attention to whether Mo Fei had released a new album and bought one to show their support. But this afternoon, when she was at work, she found out from her colleagues that Yang Yi and Murphy were in danger. Jia Siyuan, who had become sentimental after giving birth, panicked and shed tears. Scenes of her attending Murphy's fan meeting after her pregnancy flashed through her mind. She couldn't believe that the conservative and serious Murphy and the gentle and talented Yang Yi behind her would be killed in this big event that shocked the world. Jia Siyuan's crying scared the colleague who passed the news to her. The little sister panicked and pulled out a tissue for Jia Siyuan and quickly explained, "Sister Siyuan, why are you crying?" "No, they're not dead yet." "Ah, no, we don't know what the current situation is. The news said that they went to the hospital. Maybe it's just a small problem. It's not a big deal, right?" This explanation made Jia Siyuan feel better. She calmed down and regained her rationality. She took out her phone to watch the news and complained to her colleague, "You scared me to death. I thought something really happened to them." It didn't matter if he was injured or not, as long as he was still alive. Of course, Jia Siyuan didn't want them to get hurt. He was absent-minded the whole afternoon at work. He secretly took out his phone and kept checking the news and micro-broadcasting to see how things were going. As time went by, some of Yang Yi and Murphy's close friends, such as Guazi, Yang Yi, and Luo Xin, who Jia Siyuan followed, started to speak up for Yang Yi on micro-broadcasting. They said that they had contacted Yang Yi and confirmed that they were all safe and sound. These micro-broadcasts allowed Jia Siyuan's heart to relax by a large margin. In the end, what made her smile was that not long after, Yang Yi released a short video through his own micro-broadcast, which completely dispelled the rumors that something had happened to them. At the beginning, Yang Yi swept the camera to Murphy and the two kids, who were playing with the kids in the conference room. He told the netizens that they had successfully arrived at the embassy and said that they were safe and sound. "It's a blessing in disguise. Unfortunately, we happened to run into the chaos at the train station in Paris. Fortunately, when it happened, we just happened to hide in a remote women's washroom. Perhaps because the train station was too big, those people didn't search one by one, so we escaped. I just hope that everyone can forget about me hiding in the women's washroom. I hope that it won't be the biggest stain in my life." Yang Yi made a small joke to show that they weren't affected too much. Hearing this, Jia Siyuan couldn't help but laugh. She laughed so hard that tears appeared in the corners of her eyes. At the end of the video, Yang Yi still did his routine. He took Murphy to the camera and said a prayer for the civilians who were unfortunately killed and injured in this incident. Jia Siyuan forwarded this micro-broadcasting to her husband through WeChat. In this world, micro-broadcasting and WeChat were both developed by Yang Yi's company, so intercommunication was inevitable. When she put down her phone, Jia Siyuan finally showed a relaxed smile like many netizens who were relieved. The excitement in the domestic media also attracted the attention of foreign media. Some international media, such as ABC, CMM, and RTS, also paid attention. Don't underestimate the foreign media. They also quickly found out about Yang Yi's public identity. They found out that not only was Yang Yi a Chinese celebrity, a young tycoon with a net worth of several billion US dollars, they also found out that Yang Yi and Murphy were quite famous in the American entertainment industry. They also knew that they had many well-known works. In addition, Yang Yi was the creator of The Voice, as well as the boss of Facebook and the overseas version of micro-broadcasting. These identities also surprised the foreign media. They couldn't help but do a special report on Yang Yi and his family. While the news channel's host was still broadcasting, he and his partner were guessing, this is probably the biggest celebrity involved in this incident. Originally, when ABC, CMM, and other television media outlets introduced an Asian person in their news reports, it didn't pique the interest of many European viewers. But not long after, ABC's resourceful news source also dug up some news about Yang Yi. They obtained exclusive authorization to broadcast a video that had just been released. A video of Yang Yi and she playing the piano at Leipzig train station. Yang is not only the creator of Facebook and micro-broadcasting, he is also a musician through and through. Not only is he good at pop music, he's also proficient in classical music. He's really a godlike man. If you don't believe it, the video below will convince you. ABC's news host boasted. The video was edited. The first to be broadcasted was a clip of Yang Yi playing The Crave. In the video, Yang Yi was like a virtuoso, dancing his fingers effortlessly. The passionate and beautiful melody was mesmerizing. Unbelievable, incomparably wonderful, brilliant beyond compare. The host used all the words of praise to describe Yang Yi's performance. Following that, He contacted a professor at the Leipzig Academy of Music to confirm that this piano piece had not been released yet. Only then did he tell the audience, "It's very possible that this piano piece was composed by this musician who composed songs like I'm Ours and Diamonds. This is because he has a habit of improvising his own compositions." It had to be said that hard skills were the key to convincing Westerners. Yang Yi's performance not only made ABC's host admire him so much that he couldn't help but praise him, it also attracted the attention of many viewers. Many of the European viewers were finally starting to take this unknown celebrity seriously. If you still have doubts about my judgment, then please enjoy another song. The performance may not be good enough, but the melody, please believe me, will definitely move you. The host of ABC was still talking when the screen switched to the clip of she playing To Alice. The host introduced softly, "This is Yang's daughter." She was also recorded by a passerby when she was playing the piano at Leipzig railway station last night. She was also involved in this incident with her parents and brother, but fortunately, she hid in the toilet with her parents and escaped. No one was willing to pay attention to the host's words. The scene of the little girl wearing a lively pink coat and a pink headband playing the piano seriously on TV had touched the softness of many Western viewers. They couldn't help but exclaim, "Oh, oh." They tilted their heads and looked at the little girl very much. Of course, the music was also very pleasant to listen to. To Alice was a gentle melody like a lover's gentle narration. It made she even more loved by everyone. Fortunately, nothing happened to her. God bless. Many of the European viewers were happy that Yang Yi's family had escaped danger. However, Yang Yi's family, who were looking forward to flying back to China as soon as possible, now encountered a little trouble. They received news from the embassy that, for the time being, all the hostages were restricted from leaving the country by the French police. As for when they would be released, this would have to wait for the results of the investigation. Although this restriction caused a lot of controversy, the French police still stubbornly carried it out. Yang Yi's family had no choice but to temporarily stay in the embassy and accept their protection. But Yang Yi had a faint feeling that this restriction was related to him. Chapter 1284. Yang Yi's guess was right. All the hostages could not leave the country for the time being. This restriction order was indeed related to him, but it was only related to what he had done at the train station. The French police were hunting down the remaining accomplices of the grey-robed man while also searching for the mysterious person who had helped them a lot in the incident. Heroes only existed in movies. No government would like those so-called heroes who were outside the law and government management. Moreover, there was no evidence that the mysterious person who had disintegrated the KBFZ's command system had nothing to do with this batch of KBFZ. Perhaps, he was also a member of the grey-robed man? The French police had been secretly investigating, but because Yang Yi had used a stolen mobile phone to send the notice to the reporter, this secret could not be kept. The next day, someone leaked the news. Multinational media such as ABC and RTS did not hesitate to use this as a pretext to make a fuss, saying that the French police were incompetent. When there were already people helping to defuse the bomb, the attack had still caused a large number of casualties among the hostages. Of course, the French police denied it flatly. They would never admit that their military police had made a poor judgment during the attack, causing some of the KBFZ hidden among the hostages to not be killed in the first place, resulting in the heavy casualties. They have done enough to save the lives of more than 3,000 people and killed the KBFZ. They are the most trustworthy heroes of France, the police spokesman said. However, this matter had caused a lot of controversy among the French police's higher-ups. What's more, after a few days of investigation and interrogation, they couldn't find the whereabouts of the mysterious person at all. They didn't even have a clue. Their restriction order was still in effect, which had caused a lot of controversy internationally. The high-level leaders couldn't sit still anymore. We can't continue investigating. Put more energy into hunting down the KBFZ. This is what we should be doing. The voice of opposition said. Give us a little more time, or let us summon the people on the list back. I don't believe that we can't find any clues. The superintendent in charge of this matter gritted his teeth and insisted. Look at what's written on your list. XXX, American farm owner, runner-up of the 6th American Farm Shooting Competition? And this, Yang, Chinese, billionaire and superstar. You want to summon him back for interrogation? Is there something wrong with your head? He also has another identity. He served in the Chinese People's Army from XXXX to XXXX. He's a soldier, the lieutenant said without much confidence. And then, just because he was a soldier, he was suspicious? Why would a billionaire take such a huge risk to help us get rid of KBFZ? The opposing high-ranking official shook his head and revealed a sarcastic smile. You still want to summon him? Do you want the Chinese ambassador to France to sit in front of us today and question our approach? Or do you wish to face his legal team? Then there are other suspects. However, the governor ignored him and turned to look at the person sitting in the middle. Minister, I think we should stop here. Our target should be the KBFZ, not the so-called hero. Who knows, he might be an insider and was killed in the conflict. We need evidence. The lieutenant could not help but shout. But we also seek the safety of the people and the dignity of the Paris police. The governor looked at the minister and said seriously, we're already very passive in the media. Minister, even if we need to establish a hero, it should be our special police. Let the people rest assured, for next year's budget. The minister sitting in the middle looked a little moved. Leaving aside the internal affairs of the French police, Yang Yi and his family were ordered to stay in Paris. They had no choice but to continue staying in the embassy and miss the opportunity to go home for the new year. On New Year's Eve, after Yang Yi and Murphy reported to their families that they were safe, they went to the Chinese embassy in France to celebrate the new year with the embassy's diplomats, the Chinese students who were invited by the embassy, and a few Chinese tourists who were lucky enough to escape the Paris train station incident but could not return to China. Time in Paris was 6 hours slower than in China. Therefore, early in the morning, Yang Yi's family and the embassy's diplomats recorded a New Year's greeting video and sent it to Central TV's Spring Festival Gala production team. Then, they stuck up Spring Festival couplets and made dumplings with their compatriots who arrived one after another. The New Year's Eve dinner was brought forward to noon, but the atmosphere was very lively. In a foreign country, it was a very happy thing to be able to celebrate the new year with compatriots who had the same skin color and the same language. What's more, there were 2 big stars among them this time. This made the Chinese students, who were still chasing stars, very excited. The ambassador even said with a smile, when the Spring Festival Gala ends tonight, we will have a small party ourselves. Who knows, it might be even more exciting. Of course, Brother Yang and Sister Murphy each sing a song, and then a duet. Then, our cutest she will play a piano piece. Won't 4 wonderful performances come out? Xiao Kai, who received Yang Yi and his family at that time, teased them with a smile. She reached out and hugged Shi, who was currently the most popular and favorite girl in the embassy, and rubbed Shi's cute little face. When Shi heard Sister Kai say that she was going to play the piano, she smiled shyly, twisted her shoulders, and slipped out. She even shouted mischievously, no. She was already very familiar with the embassy. She was chased by a few Chinese students and ran 2 rounds before she came back. However, when the young lady came back, she discovered something new. Those stern uncles were gone, but there were still a lot of people around the table next to her father. He was teaching the Chinese students how to make dumplings. Murphy also stood there with Tong Tong in her arms and smiled as she watched Yang Yi make dumplings. Mo Fei had become much quieter in the past few days. Fortunately, Yang Yi had been by her side all the time. Otherwise, after seeing those bloody scenes, she might have closed her heart and become cold again. Today, because of the strong New Year spirit, everyone was in the banquet hall chatting and laughing as they made dumplings. There were also many fans who plucked up the courage to ask her for advice. Murphy's mood became much better. However, Tong Tong was not like his mother who liked to stay in one place without moving. He was already a little impatient in his mother's arms. At this moment, when he heard his sister's movements, he struggled to get down. Then, Shi, you have to look after your little brother. Murphy had no choice but to put Tong Tong down and remind Shi. She was a little worried. Although she was still standing next to Yang Yi, her eyes were still following the two little guys. There were too many people around their father, so she could not get a word in. She could only hold her little brother's hand and continue to wander around the banquet hall. At this moment, Xiao Kai's older sister called out from a nearby table, Shi, come over. Let's make dumplings together. There were many tables in the banquet hall for making dumplings. Xiao Kai's older sister was making dumplings with her colleagues from the business department and the cultural exchange department. However, there were not many people. The leaders were walking around to express their condolences to the people, so the staff members were not so busy. However, when Xiao Kai's older sister called out to them, the few diplomatic staff members smiled. Little brother, let's go make dumplings, okay? She hesitated for a moment before she turned to ask her little brother. Little Fuchen was looking left and right. The noisy environment gave the little fellow an endless sense of novelty. When his elder sister asked him a second time, he turned his head back in confusion and looked at his elder sister in confusion. You won't listen to me. I won't ask you any more. She pouted. However, she quickly exhaled and said energetically, let's go make dumplings. She held her little brother's hand and walked excitedly towards Xiao Kai's older sister. She even held her little brother's hand and swung it vigorously. She looked like a military official who was doing a morning parade. Tong Tong liked this feeling very much. He giggled as he tried to keep up with his older sister's long legs. Chapter 1285. She received a very warm welcome at the table of the diplomatic staff. Not only Sister Kai, but the uncles and aunties were all smiling and fighting to hug her and Tong Tong. Sister Kai was still laughing behind them. Hey you guys. How can you hug people without washing your hands when making dumplings? What if you dirty their clothes? In the end, because little Momo was too small, he was carried up by an enthusiastic auntie. Someone gave him 2 candies, and the little guy chewed one in his mouth and held the other in his little hand in front of him. He comfortably watched his sister being carried by those uncles and aunts to make dumplings. This is how we make dumplings. Look, we take a piece of dough, spread it out, and then put some meat on it. Then, we pinch it with our fingers and the dumplings are ready. Big sister Xiao Kai taught Shi, but she was clearly a rookie. Not only was the way she made dumplings, but the dumplings she made were so ugly that people couldn't bear to look at them. At first, Shi listened patiently and watched curiously. However, when Sister Kai was done, the little girl tilted her head in confusion and pouted. That's not right. Sister Kai, my papa doesn't make dumplings like this. My papa told me to make dumplings like this. The little girl gestured with her 2 small hands as if she was doing a real show. She was very serious about making dumplings for Sister Kai to see. Seeing Shi's serious explanation, the uncles and aunties next to them all laughed. Xiao Kai, you've been taught a lesson by a child. You want to teach her with your mediocre skills? Big Sister Kai, who didn't feel the slightest bit ashamed of misleading others, ignored the teasing laughter. She asked Cici in surprise, Cici, you know how to make dumplings? This sentence could be understood in another way. If she had only seen her father make dumplings, then Sister Kai would probably continue to encourage Shi to teach her the simple way to make dumplings. However, Sister Kai was destined to be disappointed. Shi nodded seriously and said, yes, I know how to make dumplings. Sister Kai, let me tell you, we also know how to make dumplings at home. Exine Air and I both love eating the dumplings made by Papa. Then, Papa said that you should pack a few as well. Later, let's see if you can find them. The little girl even imitated her father's tone of voice, which instantly made these old uncles and aunties extremely adorable. The more she talked, the more excited she became. She talked about how she and her friends designed their own dumplings as if she was telling a story. She also talked about how her brother only liked to eat the fillings when he ate dumplings but was afraid of being scolded. Accompanied by the little girl's story, the table was filled with laughter. Unknowingly, they had made a lot of dumplings. Of course, she also made a few. But it was a pity that the little girl didn't look as good. She was just a little better than Sister Kai. At noon, the ambassador who had just gone out, Gao Yi, the minister who had gone to pick up Yang Yi, and several leaders of the embassy walked in with a few foreigners. They smiled and said, "Let's welcome Mr. Smith, the ambassador of Canada to France, and Mr. Williams, the ambassador of New Zealand to France." After all, it was a diplomatic institution, and it was normal to invite ambassadors from other countries to celebrate the Spring Festival. This had nothing to do with Yang Yi, because it was not his turn to help greet the guests. However, when the dumplings were in the pot, there were fewer people around Yang Yi and Murphy. Gao Yi walked over and whispered to Yang Yi, "Just now, there was news from France that their president is signing a document. It is estimated that the restrictions will be lifted tomorrow. If you are in a hurry to go back home, I will arrange the earliest flight for you." Obviously, due to the pressure of public opinion and the frequent pressure from the embassies of many countries, the French police had to give in. Moreover, they didn't want to lose face. The reason why Gao Yi took care of Yang Yi so much was not only because of Yang Yi's special identity, but also because someone in China said hello. And this person was not Gua Zhengyan, who was just a small mayor, but the former deputy commander of the Southwest Military Region, Lieutenant General Zhang Yazhong, who had now been promoted to Beijing. He was the big boss who had invited Yang Yi to be the spokesperson of the Southwest Military Region. Although France could not find any information and refused to admit their mistakes, in the hands of the senior officials of various countries, there was a piece of information about what happened inside the train station. In China, there was a lot of information about this. Although it had not been confirmed who did it, Zhang Yazhong had asked Luo Zongxing and Shen Xinyu. Needless to say, who else but old Yang could kill so many people single-handedly with such great skills? "This guy is too bad, he even got into a fight with KBFZ." Shen Xinyu was so excited that she couldn't wait to fight side by side with Yang Yi. Luo Zongxing was much calmer. He held Shen Xinyu down, gave her a look and said, "It might not be Yang Yi. His identity is different now. It's unlikely that he would make a move casually. Moreover, I haven't seen him for more than a year. I don't know if his skills have deteriorated." Although Luo Zongxing was covering for Yang Yi, everyone was well aware. In any case, these private discussions would not be leaked. Zhang Yazhong also asked for help and asked the embassy to help Yang Yi solve the problems as much as possible so that Yang Yi could be brought back as soon as possible. After all, Yang Yi was also one of the military's own people. After knowing that they would be back in China soon, Yang Yi and Murphy looked at each other and smiled. Murphy also held Yang Yi's hand tightly. She was very happy. At noon, everyone ate dumplings together and ate the reunion dinner prepared by the embassy chefs. They celebrated Chinese New Year's Eve together with the time in China. Of course, an essential program for the Chinese New Year was watching the Spring Festival Gala. It was worth mentioning that the video they recorded in the morning was also shown on the Spring Festival Gala. Yang Yi and his family appeared in the French embassy, which caused quite a stir in China. Of course, during this time, Yang Yi's phone calls were endless. The calls from his relatives and friends across the sea were basically non-stop. It was not until the Spring Festival Gala ended and people in China fell asleep to the sound of firecrackers that Yang Yi's situation finally calmed down. The Chinese New Year's Spring Festival Gala had ended, but in Paris, night had just fallen. The embassy's own celebration of the Chinese New Year had just begun. After the ambassador gave a simple speech, he smiled and said, "Let's not beat around the bush. Tonight, a celebrity couple, who can't be invited even if we spend a lot of money in China, will come to our banquet hall. We can't let them go. Yang Yi, Murphy, why don't the two of you perform first?" This was already discussed. Yang Yi and Murphy had also practiced this new song in private. Therefore, Yang Yi stood up with a smile and made a gentlemanly gesture of invitation. Murphy gently held Yang Yi's outstretched hand. The two of them looked at each other sweetly and walked to the center of the banquet hall. Perhaps it was because she was on the stage, but Murphy's temperament suddenly changed. She, who had become weak because of worry and fear, was now calm and composed. It was as if she had naturally become the focus of the stage. Murphy showed a strong sense of confidence. "Hey, it's Papa and Mom." She clapped her hands and shouted excitedly. She had been playing at Sister Kai's table this afternoon. She was very happy to see her parents on the stage. She excitedly reached out and tugged at Tong Tong, who was busy eating snacks. "Little brother, look, it's Papa and Mom." With this tug, the fried dough twist in Tong Tong's hand fell from his pants and rolled to the ground. When she saw this, she scratched her head a little embarrassedly and whispered, But Papa and Mom, they want to sing." Sister Kai noticed this and quickly withdrew her clapping hand. She helped break open a section of the fried dough twist and handed it to Tong Tong. She said, "It's okay that it fell. There's more." Chapter 1286. With the new fried dough twist, little Momo was very open-minded. His two little hands carefully held the new fried dough twist and began to gnaw on it. He even smiled proudly at his sister, as if he had forgotten about the half of the fried dough twist that had fallen on the ground. She glanced at Tong Tong but did not argue with him. Instead, she focused on her father and mother who were walking to the center of the stage. Especially her father. When she saw her father walking to the long zither that had been prepared for him, she could not help but jump on the chair excitedly. "Yang Yi is going to play the zither?" Sister Kai asked her colleagues in surprise. Cece turned her head and looked at Big Sister Kai. She happily reported to her, "That's right. Where's the zither?" "Your father knows how to play the zither? That's amazing!" Sister Kai exclaimed as she gave she a thumbs up. At this time, Tong Tong finally raised his head. His mouth was full as he mumbled, Papa is amazing." You might not believe it, but Tong Tong's tongue was entangled by the fried dough twist so that he could not make the super sound. Cece giggled and nodded. She then turned her little head back and looked at her father without blinking. They were not the only ones who were surprised. The students and staff at the other tables were looking at Yang Yi in surprise. Even the foreign ambassadors at the main table were looking at the ancient Chinese instrument with great interest, waiting for Yang Yi's performance. Yang Yi sat in front of the zither while Murphy adjusted the position of the microphone for him. Yang Yi put on his fake nails and teased the audience with a smile. Since it's a traditional Chinese festival and there are so many international friends participating, it's natural to use our traditional Chinese instruments to spread our long and beautiful culture. Everyone laughed knowingly. The ambassador at the main table also translated Yang Yi's words to the foreign guests with a smile. Yang Yi's movements were very fast. He taped up the fake nails, and Mo Fei also picked up her microphone and stood gracefully beside Yang Yi. At first glance, the two of them looked like a perfect couple, which was also envied by others. "A full moon night. I hope you like it," Yang Yi announced. He then looked at Murphy gently and began to play the zither. The prelude to the zither was beautiful. After all, it was a zither. The melodious sound was like pearls falling on a jade plate. Everyone could not help but close their eyes and listen to it. For those foreigners who did not know how to appreciate it, although they could not hear how wonderful it was, they would still be a little amazed. They felt that it was not easy for a big guy like Yang Yi to be able to easily control this complicated stringed instrument and play such a beautiful sound. They all applauded. However, the accompaniment could not steal the limelight of the song. After the prelude, Murphy raised the microphone and sang in her soft and hoarse voice, "The spring breeze blows into my heart, I miss you so much that I can't fall asleep. Why can't you understand the meaning of the falling flowers? You can only look at the bright moon outside the window." The lyrics were a bit like a young girl's tenderness, sweet and sorrowful, but Mo Fei's voice was not as sweet as a young girl's. It was even slightly hoarse, as if it carried the sadness of time. However, just like Yang Chanqian, who Yang Yi had heard in his previous life, Mo Fei's singing was very sincere and could still touch the softness of people's hearts. Next, it was Yang Yi's turn. He played the zither while looking at Murphy and sang, "The moon hangs high, curved like your eyebrows." Indeed, Yang Yi sang well. He was gentle like a patient and considerate uncle. Many of the girls who were listening to the song below were mesmerized. But to be honest, in the interpretation of this song, Yang Yi could not be compared to Murphy. After entering the performance state, Murphy seemed to have overcome the obstacles of the past few days. She smiled sweetly at Yang Yi and sang with her not very sweet voice that could turn women gay. Especially when the two of them sang the first lines of the Shuediao Getu, "When will the bright moon appear?" With a cup of wine in my hand, I asked the blue sky, "I wonder what year it is in the heavenly palace?" Sister Kai, who was sitting next to Shi, could not help but hold her face and murmur happily, "Wow, it's so beautiful." It was not just beautiful. The way Yang Yi and Murphy sang together was so sweet that it was intoxicating. The love and sweetness that melted in the song was even more enviable. Cici heard the commotion and turned to look at Big Sister Kai. She knew that Big Sister Kai was cheering for her parents' performance. She giggled happily and puffed out her chest proudly. Yang Yi and Mo Fei's performance gave people a feeling that the beginning was the peak. The next few programs performed by the versatile international students, although there were interesting skits and French songs, which still won the applause of the audience, compared to them, it always gave people a feeling that something was lacking. It was not only the performances that were lacking. After Shi and Tong Tong finished their performances, they returned to their parents' side. Sister Kai's table also lost a lot of chatter and laughter. But fortunately, Shi still had a performance to perform. After the ambassadors pushed each other and sang a song, the host of the gala went over to invite Shi to play the piano on stage when the performance was about to become even more dull. Yay! Shi. Under the cheers of a few students who were a little excited after drinking some red wine, Sister Kai also smiled and raised her arms to cheer in unison. Everyone was so enthusiastic that Cici, who had just come down from the chair, felt a little embarrassed. She twisted her little butt in embarrassment and threw herself back into her father's arms. She hugged her father's arm while sticking out her little head and looking outside shyly. Tong Tong, who was snuggling up to his mother out of boredom, heard everyone shouting his sister's name. It took him a while to come back to his senses. He propped himself up on his chubby arms and looked at his sister. Then, he looked left and right at his excited brothers and sisters with a confused expression. "What's wrong? What's wrong with my sister?" When Yang Yi saw that she was embarrassed, he smiled and held her hand. He stood up and said gently, "Let's go. Play, to Alice, for everyone. You performed it in front of so many people last time. I believe you can do it. Everyone is calling me." Shi hugged her father, raised her head, and whispered, "That's because everyone likes you very much. Look, even Sister Kai is giving you a thumbs up." Yang Yi laughed. In fact, the performance at the train station in Leipzig last time had given Shi some courage. This time, with her father by her side, she didn't need much persuasion. She finally plucked up her courage and sat on the piano stool. Although the piano in the banquet hall was only an ordinary upright piano, due to limited funds, and although Cici's piano skills had not improved much compared to the last time, she was able to play Ode to Alice smoothly. The beautiful melody won her praise from the entire banquet hall. When she was performing, the Canadian ambassador to France, Mr. Smith, thought of something and turned to the Chinese ambassador in surprise. He asked, "Is this the little girl who performed at the train station in Leipzig?" After getting an affirmative answer, Smith said with emotion, "I've seen that video. Yesterday, my wife showed it to our daughter, hoping that she would also learn to play the piano well. I didn't expect to see the real person at the Chinese embassy today." She didn't know that she had already gained many fans all over the world. However, after Shi's short performance, everyone was still a little unsatisfied. They were all cheering, hoping to hear the performance of the other protagonist of the video, Yang Yi. Yang Yi hesitated for a moment, but still agreed generously. He took the host's microphone and said, "Before the party begins, let's observe a moment of silence for the misfortune that happened at the train station in Paris a few days ago. Indeed, the festive atmosphere of the festival has diluted the sadness in our hearts to a certain extent, but I hope that we can use this beautiful festival to pray that such a terrible thing will never happen again." After saying it in Chinese, Yang Yi repeated it in English, eliminating the need for the female host to translate. However, It was obvious that this English was said to the other foreign guests. This posture suddenly became solemn. Of course, the atmosphere had already become a little heavy due to Yang Yi's instigation. However, everyone still clapped warmly. They saw Yang Yi sitting on the piano stool, and at the same time, he placed the microphone in his hand on the shelf that he moved over, aiming it at his mouth. Was he going to improvise? The overseas student fans who liked Yang Yi were pleasantly surprised. She didn't go down, and Yang Yi let the little girl sit next to him. Although she didn't perform much, Yang Yi still wanted to let she experience what a real performance was like up close. Chapter 1287. She liked to watch her father play the piano, especially when she was sitting close to him. Whether it was in the side hall at home or in a public place like this, she felt that her father looked very good when he played the piano and sang. Perhaps it was the charm of confidence, or perhaps it was the effect of the music. Anyway, her father was super cool. Therefore, the little girl sat next to her father obediently. First, she looked at her father's skillful playing with envy. "I want to play like you, Dad. You play so well." Then, when her father began to hum softly into the microphone, the little girl raised her head again and looked at her father's side profile attentively, listening attentively. "There's a place in your heart, I know it's love." Yang Yi's voice was very soft, as if he was gently persuading a child. There was no sense of the vicissitudes and strength in his voice at all. It was as if he was a different person singing. But it was true. Yang Yi was singing a very famous charity song, Heal the World, by Michael Jackson, the world's greatest superstar in his previous life. Like MJ, Yang Yi sang with soft feelings and showed his concern for the children in his voice. Don't think that Yang Yi's English song was a little high. Everyone present, including the staff of the embassy, was a language expert. Even if the foreign students mainly studied French, the students who were able to study abroad, and were invited to the embassy dinner party, were basically students with good grades. The English that they learned in China was definitely not bad. Therefore, the simple lyrics of the English song that Yang Yi sang could be understood by everyone. Even she, who was sitting next to Yang Yi, could completely understand the content of her father's song, let alone the foreign students who had studied for so many years. The opening line, "There's a place in your heart, I know it's full of love." The content was not complicated. It was similar to the meaning of human nature is good at birth. The purpose of it was to awaken people's love for the world. Yang Yi sang softly. The lyrics, accompanied by the slow rhythm and beautiful piano music, flowed slowly into everyone's hearts like a clear spring. The entire conference hall quieted down. Whether it was the Chinese or the invited foreign guests, especially the ambassador of Canada in France, Mr. Smith, who admired Yang Yi's daughter very much, they all put down their chopsticks and listened solemnly. In this place, you'll feel there's no pain or sorrow. There are many ways to reach the place of love in your heart, as long as you care for life. As Yang Yi slowly hummed, the thoughts that he wanted to express gradually revealed themselves. It turned out that Yang Yi did not criticize the brutality of the KBFZ like the media outside. Instead, he went back to the source and grasped the crux of the problem. He even hoped that everyone would care for life, reduce conflicts, and call for a cessation of war so that the world could return to love and peace. Just like what he sang in the lyrics, make it a space, make it a place, heal the world, give each other a little more space, make this land a better place, save the world. The lyrics were quite catchy, especially the last line, make it a place, for you and for me, and the entire human race, make this land a better place, for you, for me, and even for all mankind. Everyone listened to it once or twice and memorized it. She sat at the side and listened to her father sing. In fact, she could still understand the literal meaning of the lyrics, but gradually, the little girl's limited thinking ability could not keep up with the deeper meaning of the lyrics. However, this did not prevent she from listening to her father's singing and appreciating the beauty in her father's voice. For example, there are people pledging, if you care for me, make it a place, for you and for me. She found it difficult to understand the meaning of the lyrics, but she could hear the more memorable beauty of the lyrics because of the rhyme. She could also see that when her father sang this part, he gently shook his head because he had to raise his voice. At this moment, only deep admiration was left in the little girl's heart. She could not help but turn her head to look at the brothers and sisters, uncles and aunts around her. They were all listening very seriously, and there were even many people who were shaking their hands along with the melody. Their engrossed appearance made she feel her father's charm even more clearly. "My papa," she thought proudly, firmly imprinting the cool appearance of her father playing the piano and singing a song in her heart. This song was very long, so long that when Yang Yi sang to the end, everyone could gently nod and hum a few words, "Make it a place, for you and for me." However, no matter how long the song was, it had to end. Because it was a live performance, Yang Yi did not repeat too many times in the end, nor did he drag it out too long. He just ended it with a simple trill and gently raised his hand. The whole banquet hall was silent. Everyone was silently recalling this calm song with an indescribable feeling. When Yang Yi stood up, everyone seemed to suddenly wake up and warmly applauded for Yang Yi. The sudden applause caught she off guard. She jumped down from the chair to take her father's hand when she saw him waving to her. The little girl was a little surprised and took half a step back slightly. She leaned on her father and carefully opened her big eyes. She saw the brothers and sisters, uncles and aunts sitting at the table applauding first. Then, after the uncles at the main table stood up, they also stood up one after another and gave them a bigger round of applause. There seemed to be an indescribable sense of honor spreading in the little girl's heart. She felt her little hand being squeezed by her father. She came back to her senses and looked up at him. Then, under her father's signal, she nervously turned around with him and bowed to the audience. At this time, the little girl heard a tall foreign uncle at the main table ask, "Yang, what's the name of your song?" Cici knew that this was a question for her father. The little girl turned to look at her father, only to see him calmly nod and reply in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing, "The world." Then, she saw the tall foreign uncle give her father a thumbs up and praise him, "Thank you. And you're right. Thank you. You're right. We should be more concerned about life and creating a better world." For some reason, she felt that this uncle's praise and recognition of her father seemed to carry a lot of weight. Many people cheered and applauded for this. However, before she could react in a trance, the little girl was surprised to see the tall foreign uncle give her a thumbs up again. He smiled and said, "And you, little girl, you're the best piano player. My daughter and I both like your performance very much. Keep up the good work." This sudden praise caught she off guard. The little girl was a little embarrassed and hid behind her father. Her well-behaved and cute appearance once again won her the love of everyone's laughter. Chapter 1288. The next afternoon, at the international airport in Paris, Ambassador Gao Yi sent off Yang Yi's family, who had taken the first flight home to Shanghai after the restrictions were lifted, on behalf of the embassy. Since Sister Kai was not very busy with work, she also volunteered to come and send off Shi on behalf of all the staff members who liked her. Lu Weisha's family originally wanted to come as well. David and the others were also worried sick when they heard from the news that Yang Yi's family was in danger. However, Yang Yi didn't want this small matter to affect his friend's work and studies, so he didn't agree. After much persuasion, Lu Weisha's family finally gave up on the idea. However, before boarding the plane, Sister Kai, who was still relatively young, couldn't help but feel sad in her heart. She hugged Shi and cried, "Shi, I really can't bear to part with you. You've brought us so much joy these past few days." Big Sister Xiao Kai squatted on the ground like a child, holding Shishi's hand with tears in her eyes as she sobbed. "Sister Kai, don't cry, okay? If you cry, I want to cry too. Sob, sob." Shishi seemed to resonate with Sister Kai, and her eyes suddenly turned red. The little girl's skin was white and soft, and when her eyes and nose turned red, it was as if she had put on a layer of natural rouge. The redness gradually faded, and it made people's hearts ache. Okay, I won't cry. I like you so much." Sister Kai couldn't bear to see Shishi cry, so she quickly took out 2 pieces of tissue. One was for herself, and the other was for Shishi. She pretended to be relaxed and smiled. Sister Kai, you can also come home with us. You can come to our house as a guest. Let me tell you, my father can make a lot of delicious food. Shishi sniffed and said seriously. Sister Kai smiled through her tears and said, Thank you, Shishi. Thank you for inviting me to your house as a guest, but I still have work to do. Even though Cici was very reluctant to part with Sister Kai, who had formed a deep friendship with her in the past few days, the little girl still boarded the plane back to China with her father, mother, and brother. However, on one side was a farewell, and on the other side was a reunion. Shishi was still jet-lagged, and when she walked out of the airport in Shanghai in her father's arms, she saw Lan Xian waiting for her outside. Yes, Lan Kai had brought Lan Xian to pick her up at the airport. Other than Yang Huan, who was far away in his hometown for the new year, Mo Xiaowan, Guazi, Ding Xiang, Lu Xiaoshu, Miao Chuan, and even Zhu Jie, who had heard the news, all came to pick her up at the airport. Of course, Yang Yi hadn't seen them yet, because he wanted to keep a low profile. Guazi and the others were quite popular now, and they were too big of a target. In order not to cause a sensation, they stayed in the minibus outside for the time being. When Yang Yi carried Shi and pushed the luggage trolley out of the VIP passage, Lan Xian saw them. Her loud and clear voice lit up, and she shouted happily, Shi, Papa Yang. Fortunately, there weren't many people in the VIP passage, so Lan Xian's shout didn't attract anyone's attention. She only attracted the attention of Shi, who was still half asleep. Because she had just woken up, her hair was fluffy and messy. She felt that she was ugly, so Shi had been burying her head in her father's arms. When she heard the shout, she raised her head in a daze. Suddenly, the little girl couldn't help but shout in surprise, X-air. Yang Yi put her down with a smile, and Shi couldn't wait to run to her little friend, whom she hadn't seen for more than half a month. The little girl's steps were light, and when she ran with her long legs, she was like the wind. In a flash, she ran to Lan Xian, who was just in a lazy running posture, but actually didn't run much. He, Xian air. Shi hugged Lan Xian happily. The 2 little girls shouted and laughed, jumping over there. Lan Xian shouted, Shi, I missed you so much. I thought you were coming back, but you didn't. Then my parents said that they were very worried about you. Papa said that he can't come back yet, so we stayed in a big house first. But we're all Chinese. Cici described her experience in the past few days to her friends with a smile of exultation. Yang Yi and Murphy, who was holding Tong Tong, followed behind. Lan Kai was a little emotional. He also hugged Yang Yi. Although he had a lot of questions, he only had one sentence left. He patted Yang Yi on the shoulder, breathed a sigh of relief, and said with a smile, It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back. Wu Jingjing, on the other hand, pulled Murphy aside and asked about her well-being. The 2 women whispered and chatted happily. Yang Yi also missed Lan Xian. Without the chubby little girl running around in front of him looking for food, Yang Yi always felt that something was missing. Therefore, after a few simple words with Lan Kai, he turned around, lowered his head, and patted Lan Xian on the shoulder. He smiled and teased her, Xer, come, give Papa Yang a hug. Let's see if you've gained weight after playing with your grandparents. If you've gained weight, Papa Yang will have to supervise your exercise later. Lan Xian actually deliberately ignored Papa Yang. Now that she heard Papa Yang's words, her little mouth pouted even higher. The chubby little girl couldn't help but snort and say, No, I don't want to be hugged by you. As if she was no longer sleepy, she pulled her little friend's hand and hid while mischievously shouting to her father, Papa, you have to carry both of us up. What's so difficult about that? Yang Yi laughed heartily. He took a step forward with his long legs and caught the 2 giggling little girls. He held Shi and Lan Xian in his arms like 2 bags. You've gained weight, you've gained weight. Xer. You've eaten too much delicious food at Grandpa and Grandma's house. Yang Yi smiled and teased Lon Xian. No, she has gained weight. Lon Xian giggled, pointed at she and shouted loudly. I didn't, haha, Xian has gained weight. She also shouted, and the alliance between the two girls suddenly collapsed. When they returned to the minibus, she and Lon Xian didn't want Yang Yi to leave. They followed him like two little followers. When Yang Yi finished greeting everyone, she and Lon Xian dragged Yang Yi to sit at the back. In this way, Yang Yi could sit facing the aisle, and the two girls could happily sit on both sides of him. These two guys. Murphy smiled gently and shook her head. She and Wu Jingjing sat together and chatted. Mo Xiaowan and Ding Xiang sat behind them. The few women gathered together and had a lot to talk about. When the minibus was on the highway back to Jiang City, the chatter in the bus gradually weakened. Because Tong and she didn't have jet lag and were sleepy, no one dared to disturb them. However, Lon Xian's eyes turned. She knelt on the seat and climbed up with her father's arm. Father Yang, I missed you so much. You're home so late. When no one was looking, Lon Xian finally giggled and acted coquettishly with Papa Yang. I can't help it. In fact, I also wanted to come back early. Yang Yi rubbed the chubby girl's head and said, Then, when you were abroad, did you learn how to cook those delicious food? Cici has already shown me the photos. They're super yummy, I can still remember them. Lon Xian giggled as she puffed out her tummy. Chapter 1289. Although Yang Yi's family had returned to China, their international influence had not diminished. On the contrary, Yang Yi and she reappeared in front of everyone because of an edited video released by the Chinese embassy in France on the international micro-broadcasting. They became the focus of praise and attention all over the world. Many mainstream media outlets in the West reprinted the video of Yang Yi singing "Heal the World" in their news reports. ABC's news host, who liked Yang Yi very much, said exaggeratedly, Yang is a model artist. He knows what he can do. He uses music to wake up confused people. Listen to how he sings. The host, who was as handsome and flirtatious as a coquettish person, closed his eyes, wrinkled his nose, and shrugged his shoulders. He struggled to raise his voice and sang with great effort. There are people pledging, if you care for me, make it a better place, for you and for me. Then, he shook his head and sighed, I love this song to death. Friends, really, please stop those damn wars. Let's make our world a more peaceful and beautiful place together. Please don't let such a tragedy happen again. Please don't let anyone get hurt again. God damn it, I like Yang and his song so much. The host smiled as if he hadn't had enough of it. It was not just ABC. When the video was at its peak, almost all media outlets were reporting on it. When ordinary Western people watched the video, they also had a very devout love for the song. Just look at the comments under the international micro-broadcasting that the Western media reprinted the video. I used to think that Chinese people always like to stay out of things. Yang changed my mind. His appeal moved me. I should also learn to care for life. I didn't expect a Chinese musician to be able to write such a meaningful English song. But later, when I checked Yang's previous songs, I realized that I was ignorant. My favorite song, Diamonds, was actually written by him. What's more, it was originally sung by his wife. Yang is an excellent musician, and he is also a good person with a heart of gold. Do you see his daughter, the little girl who played the beautiful piano at the train station? She's sitting next to her father and listening. I love this scene. Yang is promoting the idea of caring for life to the child, to the next generation of people who can change the world. That's so loving, so sweet. The video became popular abroad and naturally attracted the attention of the domestic media. Even under the lead of some official media, many mainstream media outlets were praising it. They said that Yang Yi and Murphy did not forget to spread positive energy while traveling abroad, showing the boundless love of the Chinese people to foreigners. Driven by the hot topic, countless media outlets also made special reports. They detailed the development history of Yang Yi and Murphy over the past few years, details of Yang Yi and Murphy's love and happiness. They followed the trend and praised Yang Yi and Murphy, earning the attention of the public. However, just as the reporters from all over the country were excited to find Yang Yi and Murphy, who had already returned to China, some people gradually realized that no one could find Yang Yi and Murphy. Even their Phoebe studio was very low-key and tactfully rejecting all interview requests. What was going on? Now was the time when they were famous and could continue to win the favor of the people all over the country. Why did they quietly stop all their work in the entertainment industry? Why did it seem like they suddenly disappeared in front of the public? Of course, Yang Yi and Murphy did not really disappear. They made a trip back to their hometown at the end of the Chinese New Year. Later, when the new semester started, there were still reporters who took pictures of Yang Yi at the entrance of Shi's school. They also took pictures of Yang Yi and Murphy at the entrance of the Phoebe studio. However, they still did not accept any interviews. Finally, in the middle of February, in the latest episode of Jishin Interview, Yang Yi and Murphy, who had made their first appearance since the incident at KBXJ at the Paris train station, expressed their thoughts to their fans through Luoxin. It turned out that after surviving a disaster, Yang Yi and Murphy realized the value of life. They also hoped to spend more time with their families and take care of their children's healthy growth. At this point, the audience could only complain helplessly, "Don't you spend enough time with your families? In the past, before this incident, I didn't see you appearing in public often. I didn't see you leaving your children behind to rush to work." Of course, Yang Yi and Murphy knew that in their hearts, they said this as an excuse. Yang Yi and Murphy made this choice because Yang Yi felt that the more they were in the eye of the storm, the more they should keep a low profile. On one hand, they had to use a positive image to get rid of suspicion. On the other hand, they had to be careful to avoid being shot at. Reducing their exposure was the best choice. It just so happened that Murphy also suffered some psychological trauma because of that incident. She also hoped that she could live a peaceful life with Yang Yi's company and walk out of this shadow. Therefore, on Sister Luoxin's program, Yang Yi and Murphy also announced their decision to temporarily leave the entertainment industry this year. Not only did they not take any jobs, but they also would not arrange a concert schedule this year. However, because they had previously promised to their fans, Murphy's new album would still be released and sold in the country's music halls and Sahara Online Mall according to the original plan. After the latest episode of Jishin Interview was broadcasted, Phoebe Studios' official micro-broadcasting also forwarded the video and announced the release date of Murphy's new album while apologizing to her fans. But interestingly, in the comment section below this micro-broadcasting, Yang Yi and Murphy's fans had the same attitude. They were calm, so calm that they didn't seem like their fans. Don't worry. It's fine as long as you have the album. Just let us know in advance when you're coming back. As long as you're doing well, we'll continue to pay attention to your music. It's good to spend more time with your family. Cultivate Shi and Huawei well. These two little cuties must inherit your music career in the future. Speaking of which, even if you don't hold a concert or accept any program announcements, it won't affect you guys from releasing songs. Yang Yi is inspired to write a song, and you guys can go to the recording studio to record it. You can just send it to us to listen to. We definitely won't mind. Caret asterisk. Perhaps it was also because Murphy's previous 2 retirements from the music industry had made these fans used to it. Everyone showed a tolerance that amazed the entertainment reporters. Yang Yi and Murphy's popularity was still declining bit by bit. Even though Murphy's album attracted a lot of attention in March, and many of Yang Yi's works were released later, there were some news reports about them from time to time. However, it was undeniable that they almost never appeared in front of the media reporters before July. Chapter 1290. Although Yang Yi and Murphy had entered a state of retirement, their legends were still circulating in the entertainment industry. First of all, after the Spring Festival, the large-scale anti-corruption TV series In the Name of the People began airing on Jiangnan TV station's primetime slot. This TV series became popular before it was aired because its scriptwriter was Yang Yi. Even if Yang Yi was currently very popular in China, the ratings of this TV series would not be low. What's more, its director was Chan Fengchen, and there was a large group of veteran actors who could definitely be called acting masters. Moreover, it was a realistic theme that attracted a lot of attention. When it first aired in February, its ratings broke Jiangnan TV station's own record. After that, this TV series caused a lot of discussion on the internet. Some young people who usually didn't watch this kind of TV series couldn't help but join in the fun. Naturally, at the end of February, its ratings were close to the previous record of Soldier's Assault on CCTV. Although it was a pity that it didn't break the record of Soldier's Assault in the end, Yang Yi's works once again showed such strong popularity. The discussion about whether Yang Yi could be considered a gold medal scriptwriter was once again rampant. Next, after entering March, Murphy's new album quietly appeared on the shelves of various music stores without any promotion. She didn't go to major TV stations to participate in singing competitions. This album, called Stories of a Small Town, featured slow, old-fashioned love songs. In the album list, in addition to Stories of Jiangqing and Stealing Time, which Murphy sang in the concert before, there were also many songs that Murphy sang solo, such as Red Bean, I Only Care About You, Just Like Your Gentleness. Of course, just like Murphy's previous album, Yang Yi also participated in this album. However, the song that Yang Yi and Murphy sang together in this album was not the song Full Moon Night that they sang at the Embassy's Spring Festival Gala. Full Moon Night was a song that came out later. Phoebe Studios Micro Broadcasting also promised to release these songs in the form of singles. In the album Stories of a Small Town, Yang Yi and Murphy sang You're the Most Precious. This song was more affectionate than Full Moon Night. After all, in Yang Yi's previous life, this was a song sung by the God of Songs. With so many fine songs, Murphy's new album Stories of a Small Town naturally showed excellent quality that surprised the fans. Although its release didn't deliberately create a big momentum in advance, after its release, it was still the album that all the music critics rushed to comment on. Even as early as the end of February, a music magazine ranked the most anticipated album in March. Murphy's new album ranked first on both the music critics and music fans lists. But what surprised the entire music industry and caused a heated discussion was the album's results after its official release. Because Murphy didn't participate in any TV station's music chart program, the songs of this album couldn't be seen on the New Song Elite list, the Music Power list, and other related lists. But in addition to these lists, Murphy's new songs still showed the performance of dominating the other lists. On the New Song Bestseller list, the first song was Red Bean. Among the top 10 songs, Murphy's new songs occupied 7 positions. There was no suspense on the radio new song chart. The first place was dominated by the confession song, I Only Care About You. In addition, 5 of the top 10 songs were from the Stories of a Small Town album. Of course, the most important list was the new album sales chart. From the first day of March, Stories of a Small Town showed amazing strength. It was far ahead with nearly twice the sales of the second place. Although many singers chose to delay the release of their albums in order to avoid Murphy's limelight, Murphy's new album showed the same strong performance as her Say It Yet album released at the end of the year before last, which shocked the whole music industry, and the music media kept exclaiming, "The wolf is coming." An album, without much publicity investment, could sell such a performance, which was enough to make people sigh with emotion about Murphy's charm and Yang Yi's strength. In mid-March, Stories of a Small Town broke the platinum record with the sales data of 20 million. Although it was not able to break the record set at the end of the year before last, this terrifying speed still made many media outlets scramble to report it. In late March, the sales volume of Stories of a Small Town had reached an unattainable figure, but at this time, the media had already expressed aesthetic fatigue with a wry smile and were too surprised to move. Of course, these honors were not surprising. Murphy did not accept any media interviews because of this. It was just that Yang Yi and Murphy's fans were too happy. Not only could they buy the new album and 12 new songs that they could slowly listen to and appreciate, but they could also be proud for a long time because of the hot discussion caused by Murphy. But no matter how well Murphy's album sold and how loud the concert was, Yang E and Murphy had no intention of making a comeback. At most, there were paparazzi who secretly took photos of Yang E and Murphy taking Tong Tong to the spring sports meeting held by Shi's school. This was one of the few times they showed their faces during this time. As April approached, Jiangnan TV's variety show, I Am a Singer, welcomed a replacement newcomer. It was a Cantonese singer from Harbour City, Lin Mu N. His soulful singing in Cantonese moved many listeners and gained him a lot of fans. Perhaps it was because of the popularity of his fans in Guangdong and Guangxi, or perhaps it was because his singing voice was very special and soothing, but Lin Mu N did not get eliminated even though his ranking in each episode was not high. He continued singing all the way until the Battle of the Masked King. Of course, Lin Mu N only sang Cantonese songs after all. Even though his backup singer was his senior brother, Chan Yijie, Lin Mu N only placed 5th in the end. Regardless of whether he won the honor of being the Masked King of the Year, Lin Mu N's solid singing and unique voice made the entire Chinese audience recognize this special singer, Lin Mu N. However, after I'm a Singer ended, Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting and Lin Mu N's micro-broadcasting both updated their statuses at the same time. All of a sudden, the fans of both parties and many passers-by were surprised. Let me formally introduce to everyone, Lin Mu N, a Cantonese singer from Tianxiong Records. He's also my little brother. Back then, he came to Zhongqing with his girlfriend and started singing at my coffee shop. Now, he's finally made a name for himself with his own efforts and has realized his dream of singing Cantonese songs in front of the whole country. Please support him. Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting also included a photo. It looked like it was taken recently. Lin Mu N and his wife, Ran Jean, were sitting at a coffee table with Yang E and Murphy. Lin Mu N also thanked Yang E for his previous nurturing in the micro-broadcasting. He took the initiative to mention that he was introduced to Chan Yijie's company by Yang E. He also learned singing from Yang E, Murphy, and Yang Yi's producer, teacher Jin Ing Ming. Many mushy words did not need to be repeated. Lin Mu N and Yang Yi's micro-broadcasting interaction surprised many media reporters. They thought that Lin Mu N's participation in I Am a Singer was not only due to his own ability, but also due to the operations of Tianxiong Records behind him. However, they did not know that Lin Mu N actually had such a relationship with Yang E. However, whether it was the media or the public, they still had a good impression of Lin Mu N. Many of the entertainment industry's verified accounts praised Lin Mu N and Yang Yi's approach. After all, if it was exposed in advance, not only would it make Lin Mu N more famous, but it would also affect the final results of I Am a Singer. Now that the dust had settled and Yang E and Lin Mu N announced it on micro-broadcasting, the friendship between these two capable singers would become a much-told story in the entertainment industry. Chapter 1291. Before May and mid-June, the news about Yang E and Murphy had decreased a lot, but in late June, the media was surprised to find that Yang Yi's work was going to be released during the summer vacation. The Truman Show, which was filmed last year, was a work written by Yang E and fully funded by Yang Yi's company. Because Yang E had basically not been in charge for the past 6 months, the early publicity of the movie was a little lacking. But it didn't matter. After the movie test screening, many reporters looked dignified and were full of sadness. They were all shocked by the reality TV show that could manipulate other people's lives, and they were also moved by the protagonist, Truman, who was not willing to surrender to the so-called fate, played by Guazi. The movie is so illusory that it makes people feel like it's telling a story from another world, but it's so real that you always have a fear that it may happen around us, in the near future. The scenes in the movie are shocking. Do you dare to imagine that except for yourself, everything is not real? From your closest parents, lovers, neighbors, passers-by, they are all just supporting roles, on standby by your side 24 hours a day. If you can't believe it, please come and watch this movie. Yang E is indeed a master of manipulating people's hearts. His new work has once again shocked people's hearts. There is no need to elaborate on the content. Come to the cinema, and you will experience a new spiritual baptism. There is an old Chinese saying, life is like a play, and a play is like life. But if you find out that your life is really just a play, how will you react? I like Gua Zi's performance. He vividly portrayed Truman's struggle and efforts. In this movie, he seems to be Truman himself. From him, you will understand that you can never stop a heart that pursues the truth and freedom. After the test screening, whether it was the passers-by's comments on movie review websites or the film critics' comments in their own columns, they all gave good reviews without exception. Almost all of them were 5-star reviews, and the final score after the test screening was as high as 9.3. Many netizens who were waiting for the summer vacation to watch the movie were looking forward to it. But the main actor of this movie, Comrade Fatty Gua, was now going through the greatest mental torture of his life. It's over. Gua Zi had been recording The Ultimate Challenge with teacher Dan Hongkue for a long time, so he had also learned a few northeastern dialects. He ran to Yang Yi's house and asked Yang Yi for advice with a conflicted expression. What did you do? Yang Yi asked in surprise. Gua Zi wanted to say something, but when he turned around, he saw Shi and Tong Tong standing beside the sofa. Shi was holding onto the sofa's armrest, and Tong Tong was leaning on his sister's body with his belly protruding. The two kids were looking at him curiously with their eyes wide open. It was as if they had prepared their stools and melon seeds, waiting for him to tell them a story. Ahem, about this matter, Shi, Mommy, wait next door for a while. Uncle Little Gua wants to discuss something with your father. Gua Zi didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and hurriedly pulled the two kids to the side hall. But we also want to listen to it. Cece pouted her little mouth and said reluctantly, You can't listen for now. Later, I'll ask Sister Ding Xiang to cook something delicious for you. Gua Zi coaxed. Tong Tong's hand was pulled, and he beamed with joy when he heard that. He said in a childish voice, Hee, delicious. Little brother, don't believe it. Uncle Little Gua is lying to kids. She said, but she was still giggling. Gua Zi finally coaxed the two kids to the side hall and let them play with the steamed buns. Then he came back and told Yang Yi with a sad face, Sister Ding Xiang is pregnant. What? Yang Yi and Murphy were both shocked. It was found out yesterday, and she went to the hospital for a checkup. Gua Zi smiled foolishly, scratched his head embarrassedly, and then sighed. It was obvious that he had a lot going on in his mind. How many months has it been? Mo Fei asked with great interest. Less than 3 months. Then what are you going to do? Yang Yi asked. Murphy interrupted them discontentedly and said, What else can I do? Ding Xiang is pregnant. Little Gua, you should get ready to marry her. Don't be like your brother Yang, who waited until I was pregnant with my second child before marrying me. Yang Yi shook his head helplessly. I also want to marry Sister Ding Xiang, but, alas. Gua Zi said hesitantly. It turned out that he and Ding Xiang had planned to wait for the movie The Truman Show to be released and win the Best Actor award before coming clean with their family. However, The Truman Show was released and before the award was settled, Ding Xiang found out that she was pregnant. This disrupted Gua Zi and Ding Xiang's plan, and they both panicked. You should tell your family quickly. Don't wait until Ding Xiang is pregnant before getting married. Murphy said in a critical tone. Gua Zi said worriedly, but if I tell my family directly, will it backfire? I'm worried that if I argue with my family, it will affect Sister Ding Xiang's mood. Now that Ding Xiang was pregnant, Gua Zi wanted to take care of her carefully. You have to tell them sooner or later, right? Now is the time. Yang Yi and Murphy gave Gua Zi an idea. However, no matter how much his friends said, Gua Zi had to deal with this important life event. He went back and thought about it. With Yang Yi and Murphy's opinions, as well as his own ideas, Gua Zi took action. On June 20th, although it was 620 and not 520, Gua Zi posted his marriage certificate on micro-broadcasting and tagged Ding Xiang. Life is not a game. With this as proof, Gua Zi will give you a lifetime of happiness. Ding Xiang, who didn't have any official comments, also forwarded Guazi's micro-broadcasting on her private micro-broadcasting and said affectionately, "Please take care of me for the rest of my life." With the sudden confession and marriage certificate, Guazi, who was about to step onto the next level of his career with The Truman Show, actually announced his marriage. This caused an uproar among the media reporters, and the onlookers were even more confused. What? When did he fall in love? How did he get married? Some time ago, some media outlets wrote that Guazi, who was about to become famous, was a potential stock. They also deliberately fabricated that Yang Yi deliberately cultivated Guazi to make a qualified husband for Yang Huan. Now, Guazi suddenly gave them two tight slaps on the face. It turned out that Guazi and Yang Huan did not have any romantic entanglements at all. Just like how they acted in the show, they were a pair of opposite sexes. But who was Ding Xiang? How did Guazi get a marriage certificate with her without anyone noticing? Some fans who often followed Guazi and were familiar with Guazi recognized Guazi. They were surprised and said, "Hey, isn't she Guazi's agent? I heard that she was sent by Yang Yi to run some foundation." An actor falling in love with his agent, as long as he didn't get involved, this might be a great story in the entertainment industry. But for Guazi, his challenge had just begun. He secretly got the marriage certificate and couldn't wait to announce it to the public. That night, Guazi summoned up the courage to go home. "Don't worry, you stay at home and drink your soup. I'll be back soon. Don't worry, I'll definitely be able to convince them. I'm very confident." Guazi opened the courtyard door and called Ding Xiang with high fighting spirit. With a smile, he put away his phone and opened the door with his head up and chest out. Bang! Comrade Guazi knelt down heavily on the floor of the living room. All his movements were natural and smooth, just like Messi, who stopped his leg, put his foot on the ground, and shot his leg. Guazian, who was sitting on the sofa with her parents in fear, was also dumbfounded by what she saw. "Dad, Mom, please blame me for acting first and reporting later. Please don't blame Ding Xiang and don't scold her. She has a baby now. What's there to be unhappy about? Please scold me." Guazi knelt on the ground and said with his head lowered. 2 minutes later, Guazi ran out of the house in a panic. Behind him, a shoe smashed out, followed by Tan Huijin's exasperated scolding, "Stupid brat, you actually left Xiao Ding outside. If you don't bring Xiao Ding back tonight, see how I'll beat you to death." Chapter 1292. It was July, and this time, the media's focus was on Yang Yi, who had not appeared for a long time. Because the amusement park, which had been reported many times, was finally going to welcome the news of its trial opening. On July 1st, the official micro-broadcasting of Yang Yi and Murphy Studio, the official micro-broadcasting of Sahara Press, the official micro-broadcasting of Dreamland Park, the official micro-broadcasting of Dreamland Park, and the official micro-broadcasting of Frozen, which had been operating since the release of the movie last year, all held a repost lottery at the same time. The prize was very special. The 4 official micro-broadcasting companies would draw 100 fans from the fans who reposted the micro-broadcasting and give them tickets to the Ice Kingdom theme park in Dreamland during its trial operation. Dreamland Park was currently only preparing to launch the Ice Kingdom theme park, and there were 2 other theme parks under construction, the Fantasy Garden theme park, which was based on the story of Alice in Wonderland, and the Future World theme park, which was based on the story of Doraemon. But even so, the Ice Kingdom theme park had made many fans, who fell in love with the movie and story of Frozen last year, ecstatic. But it was worth mentioning that the 4 official micro-broadcasting repost lottery activities, in order to prevent people from maliciously manipulating the tickets, limited the participation of fans who followed before that date. In addition, there was also a restriction on real name users, because the tickets would also be real name users, and they would need to check their ID cards and tickets before they could enter. However, this lucky draw was not just a cold rule. It also reflected the care and concern of a human being. Below the micro-broadcast, there was also a detailed description of the fans who had won the ticket. If they were married or had children, as long as they brought their household registration book and the user marked on the ticket, they would be able to bring their wife or husband, as well as their children, to the amusement park for free. This is blatant discrimination against single dogs and unmarried friends. Although there were still fans complaining about this rule, in general, everyone praised Yang Yi's generosity, which had solved the needs of many families with children. Hurry up and get married, Boss Yang Yi can't stand it anymore. July 23rd to July 26th was a big day for the trial operation of Dreamland Park. After the trial operation, the park would rest for 5 days and make minor adjustments according to the feedback. Then, from August 1st, Dreamland Park would officially open to the public. However, on July 22nd, many lucky fans who had been selected had already brought their families to Jinling City in Jiangnan. There were even many fans who did not win, but were a little unwilling to give up and came to join in the fun. There were also many reporters who had heard the news, and they gathered in Wuqing County, which had become a star city in Jiangnan, and were waiting to participate in tomorrow's opening ceremony. Both Jinling City and Wuqing County, to maintain a strict culture and hygiene, in order to maintain the local image, under the attention of the whole nation's citizens. Wuqing County even decorated with lanterns and decorations, as if at the new year. Merchants also took the opportunity to hold activities, to provide a good shopping. However, no matter how lively it was outside, no one knew that while they were all looking forward to it, a group of children and their parents had already started their day trip to the amusement park. Needless to say, this group of children was Xi, Tong Tong, Lan Xin, and Xi-Xi's friends, Lu Xiaoyu, Yu Xiaowei, Chen Shiyun, Nan Zhaoyu, Yang Luoqi, and Lu Weisha, who had already agreed with Xi to fly over from Sweden with her mother. Today was a special day for Xi and her friends. Yang Yi told Xi that she would be the first to visit the amusement park built for her. Of course, if he only brought Xi alone, she wouldn't have a good time. Therefore, Yang Yi asked Xi to invite her best friends. On the day before the trial operation, they would come in and play first. Although Yang Yi also promised to let Xi-Xi's classmates come to the amusement park to play, considering the management and safety issues, the other little students all gave their parents tickets in the form of free tickets. After the official operation, they would only come to play. Of course, Yang Yi didn't want such a happy day to be ruined by those naughty little boys. With Nan Zhaoyu among the little girls, Yang Yi had almost regarded him as a thorn in his side. Therefore, how could Yang Yi allow those naughty kids to disturb his good daughter? She didn't know the little thoughts in her father's mind. She was skipping in front and excitedly introducing to her friends. Let me tell you, it's last year, I came here with Papa, and then I saw that this place hadn't been repaired yet. Look, there are gates here. Wow, look, what is that? Xi turned a corner and pointed to the tall ice castle in the distance with a look of surprise and exclaimed excitedly. It was as if Cici had asked a question that could be answered. Her friends, who had long wanted to speak and were so excited that their faces were full of bright smiles, all rushed to speak. However, Chen Shiyun's voice was still louder. She shouted loudly, I know that is a castle made out of ice. Ha ha, it's Sister Aisha. Yang Luoqi, who always did her homework seriously, followed behind Chen Shiyun, giggled and added. Everyone was chattering, and Lu Weisha was not to be outdone. In order to find Xi this time, she had received Chinese training from a tutor for half a year. Originally, Lu Weisha had some foundation in Chinese when she was in kindergarten with Xi. After learning for half a year, she could understand most of what everyone said and could also chime in a few words. Lu Weisha's accent was a little special, but she still spoke fluently. Sure. Is our league going to play? However, when she said that, Cici couldn't understand what Lu Weisha was saying amidst the clamor of everyone's discussion. They switched back to Swedish. After a while, Xi beamed with joy and said in Chinese, I know, Lu Weisha. That's right, this is what we are going to play later. Tong Tong had grown up for half a year, and he had changed a lot. He had grown a lot taller, and his walking had become more solid, instead of wobbly. However, at 2.5 years old, he was still a baby. Tong Tong still had his trademark bulging tummy, and his little cheeks were still chubby and pink, making people want to pinch them. In order to avoid the scary eyes of the adults, Tong Tong did not want to be with his mother. He was proud of himself, holding Sister Xiaowei's hand in one hand and Sister Lu Weisha's hand in the other. In order to keep up with his sisters, he walked happily, but he did not feel tired at all. In comparison, Chen Shiyun's younger brother, who was slightly older than him, was a little lackluster. He was carried by his mother, unwilling to get down to walk. While the little fellows were chattering away, the adults were also following behind, chatting and laughing. "Boss Lon, look at how happy you are. The properties around you are selling well, right?" Chen Guoqiang asked with a smile. "How much have the property prices in Wu County Town increased recently?" Lan Hao Kai waved his hand cheerfully. "Not bad, not bad. It's all thanks to Yang Yi. Wu County Town is developing very well now, and the province is preparing to turn it into a tourism and economic development zone. Hey, do you guys think that a small investment in Wu County Town would be profitable?" Chen Guoqiang's mind was very nimble, and he spoke up. "Let's not talk about this for now. Today, our mission is to accompany the children, have fun, and enjoy ourselves to the fullest. As for business, let's go back and eat before we talk about it, right?" Lan Hao Kai spoke very well, and it was very comforting to listen to. He even patted Yang Yi's shoulder and said with a smile, "Yang Yi, now that we are in your territory, why don't you introduce us to the fun places here?" Chapter 1293. What was so fun about the Ice Kingdom theme park in the City of Dreams? That was too much. It would take half a day to talk about it, not to mention the time it would take to play. Yang Yi clapped his hands with a smile and gathered the children together. He said, "Children, today, we'll take advantage of the fact that the sun is not very hot. Let's walk outside and see who can find the most cartoon characters on this curved street. Then, when it's almost noon, we'll go to the snow castle again, okay?" Yang Yi still had a strong appeal among this group of children. When he spoke, almost every child looked at him attentively. When he finished speaking, it was as if the little guys had become active again. They jumped and jumped happily, clapping their little palms and shouting, "Okay." She was also excited. The little girl had also been carefully dressed today. She was wearing a dress with a top and a skirt, a white sleeveless top, and a black yarn skirt that was actually connected. A few layers of gauze covered her, making her look elegant and elegant. It was also exceptionally breathable and comfortable to wear. After all, the weather in July was a little too hot. Of course, in order to have a good time, Yang Yi still let Shishi wear a pair of sports shoes with these 3 Velcro strips. The color was chosen by her. Shishi liked pink very much. However, what made Shishi most satisfied was the high bun that her father had tied for her. Her hair was tied high so that she wouldn't sweat so much. It also gave people a feeling of vitality. Coupled with the white lace headband, against the little girl's beautiful little face, this little girl was fresh and cute under the sun. She was especially likable. Shishi was so happy that her cheeks were a little red. She raised the corner of her mouth and asked happily, "Papa, it's those. Sister Elsa, Sister Anna, will they all come?" "Yes, it's not just them. Some of them will appear in the future, like Alice, Diego, the little squirrel, and so on. They might all appear. You'll have to work hard to find them," Yang Yi said with a smile. What Yang Yi said had actually appeared in the storybooks he had published before, but they were still only the images of illustrations and were still being adapted into movies or cartoons. However, Shi and her friends had all seen them, and everyone had many of these cartoon characters at home. Therefore, when Yang Yi explained with a smile, the little guys all shouted excitedly. "Then let's go find it." Cece let out a cry of joy. Her crisp voice was like the singing of a lark, echoing in the park that was shaded by the trees. It was really not difficult to find. After turning around the passage in front of the gate of the park and circling around a flower bed, Chen Shiyun, who was running at the front, turned around in surprise and shouted, "I found it, Diego." The children all ran up like a swarm of bees. Lu Weisha followed Shi and ran out, while Yu Xiaowei could only pull Tong Tong alone. After all, Yu Xiaowei was 2 years older than these little friends. Moreover, she grew up in a single-parent family, so her mind was a little precocious. At the very least, she knew how to take care of Tong Tong's feelings. She didn't dare to run too fast for fear of pulling down Tong Tong. Fortunately, Yu Xiaowei quickly saw the oversized doll that everyone was surrounding. Her anxious mood could slow down a little. This isn't Diego, this is Sid. Sid can stand up and howl. Lu Xiaoyu giggled, baring her fangs and brandishing her claws to show Sid's daily comical appearance. No, this isn't Sid either. Sid is a man, and this one has hair. It should be a woman. I remember. There's one who looks like Sid. Her name is Brooke. She has a super beautiful house. It's all crystal. She had a good memory. She rolled her eyes and said. But at this time, the sloth, Miss Brooke, suddenly moved. She turned around and stretched out her hand to greet the children. Her expression was still immobile. Ah! Unexpectedly, the sudden movement of the big doll startled the children. She also took a few steps back in panic and snuggled with her friends. Nan Xiaoyu couldn't compare to the curious Tong Tong. He was so scared that he hid at the back and even looked at the adults behind him, trying to find help. Are you a monster? Chen Shiyun mustered up her courage and stepped forward to ask. The other party waved his hand, indicating that he was not. In fact, it was a rule of the park that the staff who acted as cartoon characters didn't speak. It was just like in Western countries, where people couldn't tell children that Santa Claus was fake. A cartoon character who didn't speak could at least maintain a sense of realism in front of the children. Perhaps it was because they saw that this big doll was not threatening. The children who were huddled together in fear just now became bold again. Cece couldn't help but take a step forward and ask in a low voice, "Then what are you? Why did you suddenly move? What should I do? If I can't speak, how can I answer with body language?" The staff stood there awkwardly. Fortunately, at this time, Yang Luochi said weakly, "Are you really, Brooke?" The staff was overjoyed. She gave Yang Luochi a thumbs up. "Wow! It's really Brooke." Instantly, the children exclaimed in surprise. "You're so beautiful. Your hair is all curly. And your eyes are so big." The group of little girls talked at once. This made the staff member, who was hidden in the thick doll clothes, burst with joy. She cupped her face and made a shy gesture. The adults finally came. Yang Yi waved the camera in his hand and said with a smile, "Okay, who wants to take a picture with Miss Brooke?" Me, I came first." Chen Shiyun shouted excitedly with her hand raised. "Papa, I also want to take a picture with Miss Brooke." She was so excited that her little face was red. She jumped up and down, and her tied hair was a little messy. A few strands of hair fell naughtily beside her ears. "First, take a picture together, and then take it one by one," Yang Yi called out. Not only him, but several other parents who brought cameras also picked up their cameras with a smile. They were ready to take a few more pictures of their children and share them in the WeChat group. At first, it was very good. The little girls stood together and happily took a picture with Brooke the sloth with a peace sign. But soon, Chen Shiyun shouted excitedly, "Uncle Yang, hurry up and take a picture for me. I still want to find others." All of a sudden, the enthusiasm of the little girls was ignited, and they rushed to take a picture quickly. Tong Tong didn't understand why the sisters were so excited. He just sat on the mountain and watched the tigers fight. He jumped briskly beside Lan Xian, waving his little hand and laughing. In the end, the sisters ran forward one by one, followed by their fathers. But when it was his turn to take a picture, Tong Tong suddenly realized that there was only sister Lan Xian left, whose eyes were shining with wisdom. "Hey, come here. Mommy will play with you." Murphy smiled and clapped her hands. However, Tong Tong turned around and ran to sister Lan Xian. He pulled on sister Lan Xian's hand and turned back to his mother with a mischievous smile. Lan Xian didn't mind bringing Tong Tong along. She even said to Tong Tong proudly, "Let's not look for them. They're so big. We'll just take pictures." Her explanation was a little confusing, but Lon Xin meant that she wanted to wait for everyone to find them before taking pictures with those cartoon characters. Tong Tong didn't care whether he understood or not. He nodded blankly and habitually said, "Okay." The two little guys, one big and one small, waved their hands and walked in front. Their proud laughter was even more cheerful than the surprised screams of the sisters in front of them. Chapter 1294. She and her friends could play for a whole day if they were asked to simply look for the cartoon characters that were scattered in every corner of the park. However, there were so many fun machines in the park. Soon, the children were attracted by She's new discovery. "Come and see. There are so many sleds here." She stood in front and waved her little hands excitedly as she shouted loudly. Finally, the little girl felt that it was not enough, so she softened her voice and added, "It seems like it's really fun." Coincidentally, Lon Xin and Tong Tong were passing by with Murphy and Wu Jingjing, who were chatting happily behind them. When they heard She's call, the two children walked over curiously. "Xer, little brother, look, there are sleds here." When she saw them, she grabbed the railing with one hand and gestured with the other. She could not wait to introduce the sleds to them. "Little brother, these sleds are much bigger than the ones we rode in Sweden." "Pretty sleds?" Tong Tong repeated curiously. Although he could not remember what his sister had said, he was more interested in sleds. He also walked closer and looked at it with his big eyes. Inside, there were many sleds arranged in a large field. The sleds were in different colors. Some were classic green, some were beautiful blue, some were sweet pink, and so on. But without exception, the bottom of the sleds were painted with the sharp-edged look that a sled should have. Actually, this ride was not complicated at all. It was just a modified version of those spinning honeypots or spinning coffee cups. However, the Snow Palace theme park had changed it into the style of a sleigh. Moreover, the entire area where the sleigh moved was decorated with ice blue floors. Even the pillars were decorated with snow-white spruce trees and silver pine trees. It looked like a world of ice and snow. Even though the sun had begun to shine outside, looking at these colors gave one a cool and comfortable feeling. At this moment, She's friends came over one after another. Yu Xiaowei walked over to Tong Tong and grabbed the railing to look inside. She exclaimed softly, "Wow, it's so beautiful." When Tong Tong heard her, he turned around and looked up at Sister Yu Xiaowei and giggled. When Yu Xiaowei lowered her head, Tong Tong mischievously turned his head away as if he was not the one who was giggling just now. "Ha ha." Yu Xiaowei giggled and reached out to pat Tong Tong's head. "Come, let's sit in the sleds. Each family will get one, but after sitting in the sleds, the children are not allowed to climb up." Yang Yi gestured for the children to change into their slippers and enter the venue. Although the trial operation had not started yet, today was considered a small rehearsal. Therefore, all the staff were at their posts and the sleds could be started for the children to play. However, once they sat in the sleds, it was impossible for the children to settle down. The moment she entered the sleds, she immediately climbed onto the seat and knelt on it. She grabbed the edge of the sleds and giggled as she looked at the other children. Sister, I want to." Tong Tong shouted anxiously. He was still used to asking his sister for help, but in reality, as he grew taller, he could climb up on his own. Tong Tong could not wait any longer. Without waiting for his sister's help, he climbed onto the seat next to his sister. Halfway up, she turned her head and looked at her little brother. She was also very enthusiastic. She grabbed little Lil Frog's pants and pushed little Lil Frog's butt up. Finally, Tong Tong came up. He stood on the seat and waved happily at Sister Lon Xin, who was not far away. Over here. Her Majesty is sitting in the middle of the children. Let me take a picture of you." Yang Yi held Murphy's hand and brought her up. After that, he took a step back and smiled as he held the camera. Murphy giggled. She was in a good mood. She hugged Shi with one hand and Tong Tong's but with the other as she looked at Yang Yi's camera. However, the two children were restless. She hugged her mom's shoulders and giggled. If Mom is the queen, then I'm the princess. Me too, I'm the princess too, Tong Tong quickly said, as if he was afraid that his sister would forget to bring him along when she ascended the throne. You're not the princess. You're a boy, so you should be the prince. She retorted. Tong Tong knew that there were princesses and princes. He seemed to have suddenly realized something and said, "Oh, I'm the prince." "No, you're Cinderella. How can you become the princess so easily?" Murphy teased she and laughed. "Ah, no, I want to be the princess." She shouted as she shook her but coquettishly in front of her mother. When the sleigh started to spin, the entire venue was filled with the cries of the children. Although the sleigh wasn't spinning very fast, the children's cries and sharp laughter made them feel as if they were riding a roller coaster. It wasn't that they were afraid. The sleigh was spinning at an average speed. It spun on its own for a while, then rotated steadily around the outer ring. It wouldn't cause them to feel dizzy at all. However, they had a lot of companionship to play with. Cece, who was usually not so easily agitated, also let her father support her slender waist at this moment. Then she stood on the chair, revealing her smiling face with 2 missing teeth, and shouted loudly, "Little fishy, I see you. Where are you? She, where are you? Look behind you. Hee, I'm going to catch up with you. Ah. Drive. Ha. Just like that, the venue was filled with the children's laughter. Moreover, they were addicted to sitting on the sleigh and couldn't bear to get down. It was as if they couldn't get tired of playing. However, it was also good. Because the sun was high in the sky, the air outside was hot. It was not as comfortable as being in the sleigh venue. All the fathers and mothers took out the water or drinks they brought and asked the children to drink. It wasn't until after 11 o'clock that the music outside started to play. Yang Yi called out, Let's go. Let's go outside quickly. There's a parade outside. They're all very beautiful cars and cartoon characters. It's a pity not to see them." Only then did the little ones rush out together in a hubbub. The parade outside really didn't disappoint them. Although it was only a dress rehearsal, they knew that the big boss and his children were watching. Every cartoon character was performing very hard. In the long motorcade, in addition to the singing and dancing cartoon characters, there was also Donald Duck's toy car, Officer Rabbit's police car, and carriages with Chinese characteristics. There were many Chinese-themed cars, which were specially designed by Yang Yi so that this fantasy city would contain more Chinese elements. "Little brother, look, it's a little train." She bent down and hugged her little brother amidst the excited cries of her friends. She pointed at the little train with a cartoon head that was slowly approaching not far away. "A little train." Little Rusty clapped his little hands happily. He stared at the little train with a longing look on his face. However, the little boy's voice couldn't be heard because the voices of the sisters next to him drowned him out. That's a real sleigh." Lu Xiaoyu was so excited that she jumped up. Chapter 1295. When watching the float parade, there was no need to pay too much attention to the content. It was fine as long as it was lively. The children's thoughts were very simple. At first, they chased after the float happily. Then, under the warm invitation of the cartoon characters, a few of the little girls hesitated, but in the end, they still joined the dance team. Although it was just twisting and turning, the bonfire dance was just a group of people holding hands and spinning around in circles. The children were led by their favorite cartoon characters and danced happily to the beat of the music. Looking at their rosy little faces and happy expressions, it was obvious that they were having fun. Of course, because it was close to noon, the remaining sunlight was very hot. After the parents finished taking pictures, they hurriedly called the children back to a shady place, or they walked up with umbrellas. "Do you want to sit on the float? Now is the only chance to sit on it and experience it. It will be more difficult in the future. After the park opens, tourists are not allowed to stand on it." Yong Yi's laughter came from behind. The little girls looked back in surprise and found that Uncle Yang had already brought Lon Xin and Tong Tong onto the small train. Lon Xin happily stuck her head out and waved at her friends. At this moment, Tong Tong was playing the role of the driver. He sat in the cab of the train, of course. It was not a real cab. In order to make it more realistic, the cab of the real driver was hidden. The little guy was very serious and did not have time to greet his sisters. He was busy turning the loose steering wheel, just like his father driving. At the same time, his red little mouth was trembling as he did his own sound effects. Of course, if he did not spit out saliva and bubbles, this driver would be quite qualified. I want to sit too. The children rushed over like a swarm of bees, their little faces shouting excitedly. But there are no more seats on it. Lon Xin squeezed next to the window of the small train and said awkwardly, "Wasn't that right?" Even Yang Yi had to come down to let she go up to take care of her brother. "I want to sit on the boat at the back." Lu Xiaoyu cheerfully pointed at the flower car at the back and shouted, "Xiaoyu is hungry. I'll go with you, okay?" Lu Weisha tried her best to speak Mandarin. "Of course." Lu Xiaoyu giggled. "Wait for me, I'm going to take that ship too." She stayed by her brother's side for less than 2 seconds. When she heard the commotion outside, she called out briskly and squeezed her way out. Nan Zhaoyu took a fancy to the Chinese-style carriage. He called out, "Who wants to ride in the carriage with me?" However, no one paid any attention to him. Chen Shiyun was calling the last person, Yu Xiaowei, to a float surrounded by musical notes. "All right then, I'll go by myself." Nan Zhaoyu scratched his head and climbed into the large carriage by himself. The float parade did not take long, but the children had a lot of fun. After it was over, in order to avoid the scorching sun, everyone moved to the snow castle that Shi and the others had been talking about all morning. Everyone walked through the door that was about 4 to 5 meters tall. The scene in front of them made the children cry out excitedly, "Wow! It's so beautiful!" Yu Xiaowei whispered as she looked at the blue in front of her enviously. "Wasn't it?" Although it was not real ice, it was just a blue-toned wall paint, spaced by hollow blue-toned glass tiles, and diffused light to create the effect of an ice palace. Not only that, but the floor was also covered with snow-colored tiles. Combined with the snowmen, snow treasures, and the winding ice stairs, the hall gave off the feeling of a real ice palace. This is the place where Sister Elsa lived. It's all made of ice. She could not help it. She pulled Lu Weisha and Tong Tong's hands and walked in the middle of the children. She introduced enthusiastically, "Let me tell you, before the Spring Festival, my brother, parents, and I went to Lu Weisha's hometown to play. We even stayed in a big hotel like this. It's all made of ice. It was so cold at night, and it was also blue like this." Through Cece's introduction, the children seemed to have followed her memories and walked into this wonderful world of ice and snow. At noon, everyone had lunch at a Western restaurant on the 3rd floor of the ice castle called Royal Feast. Just the name alone sounded very domineering. In fact, the decoration of the restaurant was also very domineering. It felt like a palace. Not to mention the independent tables in the side hall for normal visitors. Because of Yang Yi, they were directly seated in the main hall in the middle. The hall was resplendent and had a cathedral-like ceiling with all kinds of patterns. There were huge chandeliers, and although they were fake candles, the dozens of candles still lit up the hall brightly. The long table made of solid wood with red paint was set up in an orthodox Western-style setting. There was a row of chairs with red velvet cushions. It looked very high-end. I feel like we've experienced the feeling of being invited to a dinner party by the Queen of England. Yu Xiaowei's mother, Yu Ying, said jokingly. "This is all thanks to the 2 bosses." Chen Guoqiang smiled and raised his glass to Yang Yi and Lan Hao Kai. "I didn't see the price, but I'm guessing that if you want to enjoy a table like this again after it opens, it'll probably cost more than a few thousand. Right? Boss Lon? Haha, don't worry about that. Let's eat. I think the steak here is pretty good. It's very tender." Lan Hao Kai laughed and changed the topic. But the cake isn't good. I still like Papa Yang's cake. I also like Sister Ding Xiang's cake. But Sister Ding Xiang is pregnant now, so she didn't make a cake. Lon Xian blinked and started to comment. Lon Xian's mouth was still very picky. Whether it was good or not, she knew the scale in her heart. Yeah. Xian, let's wait for Sister Ding Xiang to give birth. Then we'll go and play with Sister Ding Xiang, okay? She said excitedly. Finally, there's someone younger than my brother. Tong Tong seemed to hear his sister calling him. He lifted his head and looked at his sister, a little confused. However, he realized that his two sisters were in a heated discussion and had no intention of bringing him along. The snow castle would be the tallest building in the whole of Fantasy City. Its height was not only reflected in its appearance, but also in its interior. Every floor had different attractions. For example, Elsa's room when she was young, Anna's room when she was young, Baby Snow's bedroom, and so on. There were also some fantasy rooms that could be viewed using modern technology and 3D glasses. The children were tirelessly exploring room by room, floor by floor. The adults were so tired that they wished they could just take the elevator and wait from the lowest floor to the highest floor. However, when they climbed to the highest floor and walked out of the dark room, they came to the spacious and bright castle balcony. They walked around the balcony with a protective net and looked at the scenery around them. Looking at the gorgeous sunset before sunset, it was as if the afternoon's hard work was worth it. The children were not tall enough. They had to be carried by their fathers to look out over the high stone walls. The other children were fine. Tong Tong was also carried by his mother. However, Yu Xiaowei and Lu Weisha were a little embarrassed. Lu Weisha's father did not come, and Yu Xiaowei also did not have a father. Their mothers could not carry these two large girls who were not light. Come, Uncle Yang will protect you. Yang Yi let she hug his neck and lay on his back. Then, he carried Yu Xiaowei in his left hand and Lu Weisha in his right hand and easily carried them. Ah! She was happy and excited. She screamed and giggled. Ah! Yu Xiaowei whispered shyly and grabbed Uncle Yang's thick arm excitedly. Shi, your father is so awesome. Lu Weisha also laughed happily and said to Shi word by word. She had heard the words, so awesome, from Shi and Tong Tong countless times. Naturally, she could say it very smoothly. He. When Shi heard her father being praised, it was as if she was being praised. She was also very proud. Chapter 1296. In fact, in the Ice Snow Kingdom theme park, in addition to the Ice Snow Castle, there were many other attractions for tourists to play. For example, the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs theme roller coaster, the water ride where they rode to the pirate ship to explore, and so on. These were all very fun, but because it was particularly hot today, and it was too exciting and dangerous, Yang Yi didn't arrange for the children to play. It was also a regret. Anyway, it wasn't just once. In the future, there would be opportunities to play a second time, and a third time. However, Shi and her little friends had a lot of fun today, because in the Ice Snow Castle, there were not only mirror rooms, Bobo Ball Pool, and other rooms for them to explore, but also corresponding ice and snow skit performance hall. The little guys had a lot of fun, and they also feasted their eyes. However, there was no end to the fun. After coming down from the Ice Snow Castle, looking at the gradually darkening sky, the little guys were reluctant to leave. I don't want to go back yet. There are so many fun things to play with, Chen Shiyun shouted, saying the thoughts of all the children. Several children surrounded Shi. They looked at Yang Yi pitifully, not knowing what the tour guide Uncle Yang's decision would be. I also want to play, Shi whispered. She was also worried, but she also looked at her father expectantly. Yang Yi raised the corner of his mouth, waved his hand, and laughed. Of course we won't go back so early. There are more fun things in our amusement park tonight. How can we miss it? Let's go eat something, and then play for a night. Suddenly, a surprised expression surged on every child's face. which was illuminated by the setting sun. Wow! I knew it. Uncle Yang is super awesome. Chen Shuyun was wild with joy. She danced with joy, not ladylike at all. I like Uncle Yang so much. Lu Xiaoyu clapped her little hands and giggled. I like it too. Nan Zhaoyu was so happy that the corner of his mouth almost reached his ears. No, because I said I like it first. Lu Xiaoyu said. Then what should we do? Nan Zhaoyu scratched his head. The little Buddhist boy had no intention of arguing. Lu Xiaoyu said to him seriously, You can't say that you like her very much, but you can say that you like her very much. Dinner was also eaten in the park, but compared with the solemn and formal Western restaurant in the castle, the dinner was much more interesting. For example, there was a frozen-themed egg meal. The yellow steamed egg was decorated with snowflakes made of egg white. On the plate, there was a snowflake that looked like ice cream, but it was actually made of eggs and quail eggs. There were also some meat floss sprinkled at the bottom for decoration. There was also a rabbit-themed bento with 2 carrots as ears, making the rabbit look even cuter. Of course, Lan Xian wanted to eat meat. Among the beef ribs she ordered, besides lettuce and small tomatoes, there was also an egg fried in the shape of a Mickey Mouse. Not to mention the taste, looking at the cute image of the food, the little guys liked it very much. Not knowing whether it was because they were hungry from playing or because they were stimulated by the vivid images, the little guys all buried their heads in the food and ate very energetically. But it had to be said that being able to stop to eat and rest, the adults secretly heaved a sigh of relief. I suddenly feel that I'm old. Wu Yu and Murphy said with a wry smile, even the children can't persevere. They are so tired after walking for a whole day. Wasn't that right? Except for Chen Guoqiang and Yang Yi, who were boxing and fitness trainers, who were still full of energy, the other parents were all frowning and rubbing their calves helplessly. At this moment, the children were still shouting and making noise. Even Shi and Chen Shuyun couldn't sit still. While standing and eating, they chatted with their friends who were separated by a few adults. Tong Tong also had a lot of fun and didn't feel tired at all. After Murphy fed him 2 mouthfuls of rice, the little guy twisted his body and ran to the middle of his sisters to see what they were eating. He chewed the rice in his mouth and made a vague hee-hee sound. But fortunately, the activities at night didn't require them to travel long distances and climb up and down as during the day. Yang Yi brought everyone to a ride that not only made the children scream in surprise, but also made the adults happy. A merry-go-round. No, in the Ice Kingdom theme park, it had a new change. It was no longer called a merry-go-round, but a carousel reindeer. This was because it was the main character who often pulled the sleigh and led everyone over the mountains in Frozen, the reindeer. In this rotating reindeer area, not only were there reindeer with white to gray hair, but there were also reindeer with brown and red noses that were exclusive to the Christmas sleigh. All kinds of reindeer looked vivid and beautiful under the bright lights. Looking at the dreamy carousel for convenience's sake, it was still called a carousel. In the night, Murphy's eyes couldn't help but become a little dazed. Wow! Murphy couldn't help but stretch out her hands and gently grab Yang Yi's arm, looking at Yang Yi in surprise. But it was a pity, because the children wanted to play more, and it wasn't safe for them to sit on the carousel alone. Yang Yi and Murphy could only take care of one each. Yang Yi took Shi, and Murphy took Tong Tong to sit on the carousel. Although the carousel in the theme park was much more beautiful than the carousels in other small amusement parks, in such a large space, the children still pulled their parents and asked to sit closer to each other. For a moment, in the small space, everyone's laughter were squeezed together, just like boiling hot water. It was very lively. Yang Yi could only ask loudly, "Are you all seated?" The children's childish laughter answered, "Hee, we're all seated." "I haven't sat down yet, wait for me." Lan Xian's loud voice was also very penetrating. Ha ha ha. Amidst the children's laughter, everyone waited for Lan Xian for a while before Yang Yi waved his hand to signal the staff to turn on the carousel. "What now, you're white on the theme tonight?" When the carousel started to turn, in the midst of the children's laughter, a light singing voice suddenly came from the middle of the carousel. Eh? There's a song? Of course, this was a musical carousel. Shi's reaction was the fastest. She turned her head in surprise, looked at her father, and said crisply, "Let it go." "Yes." Yang Yi smiled at the little girl. As the carousel started to turn, the song flowed slowly. When the climax started, she couldn't help but hum softly, let it go, can't it back anymore." When she started to hum, she turned her head in surprise and saw that Yu Xiaowei, who was next to her, was also humming along with her. The two girls looked at each other and smiled. They understood each other's meaning. Then, the two of them looked at each other, gently shook their heads, raised their voices a little, and continued to hum together. Hearing Shi and Yu Xiaowei's humming, Lu Weisha, Lu Xiaoyu, and the other children also joined in the fun. After all, they were already familiar with this song last summer. It was even popular among the children in the country for a period of time. Let it go. In the end, it became a chorus from all the children. Tong Tong leaned into his mother's arms. He didn't want to be left out. He saw that the little guy's face was also full of excitement. He waved his little hand and sang along, pull the dog hook, pull the dog. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.